The story begins on April 10th, 2019. Charlie was sitting on a hospital bed, desperately trying to contact her boyfriend in the chat, but no answer came from him. She could not allow him to disappear suddenly and leave her without support in the hospital when her life glowed with the last rays. When the nurse came to the ward to take care of Charlie, she was covered by a real shock. Charlie disappeared without a trace. The refugee stood on the street under the shining sakura, thinking about how nature could be so unfair. Flowers bloom, whereas it slowly dies from cancer. To get home, the girl chose a taxi. The caring driver caused her memories of his late father, whom she still loved. To encourage the girl, the driver handed her a small amount of money and urged to be happy. A bright yellow candy was wrapped inside the bill. It was such a delicious tietz that once gave her, leaving warm memories in her heart. Finally, the girl came to her home, feeling every step of approaching the long-awaited rest. Not only men's shoes, but also women's shoes were lying on the floor. Stepping on the floor, scattered on the floor, Belyanka moved deeper into the house. What is it? In the door slot, she caught her gaze on Parker. Her boyfriend lay in bed next to the unknown, having fun discussing the insurance payment that Charlie would receive after Charlie's death. A horrible awareness swept the girl, because her girlfriend Lucy was quietly resting in bed with Parker, or burst into the room, interrupting the conversation. Lucy rushed to her former girlfriend, sincerely trying to reassure her and convince that the situation was not the way she imagined. Of course, the girl did not weaken. She began to threaten that very soon the entire internet learned what these two did, and even Lucy's peace was unable to quench her rage. However, the girlfriend made a fatal mistake, stating that she should live alive, and Charlie did not immediately restrain her anger, immediately rushed at her with his fists. Parker did not stay away. Decisively joining his new girl, he inflicted a former praise. It finally plunged Charlie into a shock. She exclaimed that this man had no right to raise her voice at all because he lived at her expense. Then Parker causes a second, much more powerful blow. The girl fell on the floor like a fragile doll. Betrayal has been covered by a terrible awareness. Charlie seems to be dead. Her last memory returned to his father's image again. At the first meeting, young Charlie brought her father a promise to always stay happy and live a full-time life. However, it seems that a colleague suddenly woke her up. Charlie looked young and perfectly healthy and was fascinated in her reflection in the mirror. Didn't she die just a few minutes ago? On the table lay a pale pink phone, which the girl used 10 years ago. The screening shows a photo where she smiled happily next to the Parker, and clearly visible the date, April 10th, 2009. The heroine was engulfed by an unexpected awareness. It seemed that she had returned 10 years into the past. In shock, she opened the door of the office belonging to Shellis Parker. Charles swept a new wave of hatred. Only a few minutes ago, he was involved in her murder, and now she smiles happily. The guy was clearly confused because he did not expect such a reaction and was devoid of the right words to answer. In the memory of the girl again, the memories, distorted by rage and hatred, the image of a former boy and a sobbing girlfriend. Charlie, not trying to create the illusion of extraordinary friendliness, quickly flashed past. Someone immediately realized that something was wrong, however, despite that, tried to stop it. The girl pulled her hand out of his grip and screamed loudly, warning him. Let her not approach her or even talk. In the midst of the controversy, Lucy entered the office to find out what caused this noise between the two. Exhausted with recent events, Charlie's nerves did not stand. The tears of anger immediately instilled on her cheeks. It was at this point that the manager, Yanin, intervened in the situation. She came to report that the conflict gained excessive volume, and also said that the manager was actively looking for the culprit of this noise. Men Edgeriggers is a businessman who was once known as the most pleasant and impartial person in the department. He released Charlie, reporting that the task was completed, and stretched her folder with documents on which the blue dress was laying. He probably belonged to the chief. Hearing the demand not to interfere with the employees with personal issues and still lost after resurrection, the girl slipped and fell on the floor. However, fate ordered otherwise. Jeremy caught her in time without letting it fall. It was his first gentle touch to her. Charlene expected such a turn, and without spending time, immediately departed from the new moon and disappeared. Her determination to leave, or rather, to leave everything forever, did not know the limits. Without any farewell to a boy or girlfriend, even leaving a bag on her desktop, the girl left the office unconditionally. Memories of me relentlessly encompassed Jerry's mind, intertwining with her constant efforts to understand what is really going on. Immersed in her own thoughts, the heroine again made a mistake. Leaving the elevator, she slipped, and there was no one who could support her. Spring returned, and the cherries blossomed with a gentle pink blossom, filling the streets with the magic. She was sitting in Tobus. Charlie persistently sought the meaning of Liet's sleep and tried to find out if she could influence her future. Her reflections suddenly interrupted a service call from a manager, who, no doubt, brought more pleasure than another call from the parking lot. Hiding the phone in her pocket, Charlie felt the shock again, brought by a grueling day. It could not be only illusions. Everything was absolutely real. In the hand, Charlie lay a bill and a bright yellow candy. This is the one that was presented with a good toxist in her past life, as well as the last gift that she once received from her father. Memories of her father, before whom she vowed to live happily, forced the girl to cry. Rough emotions were swept by Charlie when the Parker phone rang in response. Is he not realizing that she no longer wants to hear him? Meanwhile, Parker stared intently at his phone, trying to solve why she was silent this time. There was an opportunity to distract him from heavy reflections. Lucy turned to the boy, asking if his girlfriend answered him. It turned out that the desired never happened, so the girl suggested that everyone go to taste the chicken. It seemed that her face literally shined with happiness when she expressed her idea. The moment of enlightenment was short. The manager abruptly interrupted their conversation, obviously dissatisfied with the fact that employees are distracted from work. According to Parker, it is he who always unfairly accumulate claims. Lucy also tried in vain to be allowed to see Charlie. This fact made her understand that the girlfriend would no longer behave as before, and it clearly upset her. By this point, Charlie has already arrived at home. It seems that a password to the front door was Parker's birthday. She had no doubt. Even before the password change, she chose today as a symbol of a new beginning. It seemed strange to return to the house that witnessed the events of the last decade, because the last time when she was here, she learned about betrayal and deception. But the tables kept testimonials of their joint moments with a photo sparker and Lucy, and a toy which was presented by her girlfriend once stood nearby. All these things were instantly hit the landfill because she no longer saw any value in them. Here's what was needed: a savings book that stored funds for the loss of a breadwinner. The girl used this money to cover the loan and rent. At this point, Charlie realized that her financial problems were a way out, and his name is Parker. A true enthusiast of actions that skillfully knows when buying or selling. She made a decisive decision. Such an opportunity could not be allowed to slip. The guy again declared himself by sending SMS with an invitation to enjoy the delicious chicken together. Of course, she did not want to go out, but a fervent desire to move and finally pay with him. Parker was very nervous looking at the phone screen. What was found on Charlie? Again, the manager escaped him from his own world. He did not like that the young man, instead of performing his work responsibilities, was in vain spent time by phone. Instead, not allowing himself to delay, the manager persistently demanded reports that had to be presented up to this point. The marker prepared the reports but made a mistake, forgetting to bring the latter. He felt a pleasant pleasure in this situation. Although the manager was his peer, the position of the latter was higher. And in addition, he forced the young man to work hard. However, as always, Lucis did not let down. With a courageous smile, she attached a sticker to his monitor with an invitation to a snack together. Parker, feeling a moment of joy with such attention, immediately agreed and invited her to meet near Larka. After that, the working day gained more lightness, but the guy was again busy, not about business. But that before the arrival of Lucy, the car must be tidied up. Charlie carefully selected her outfit, trying to remember how she dressed 10 years ago. Makeup raised a number of questions. Earlier, it seemed not to use cosmetics at all, and now it was due to appear on the world as the most beautiful. But Kudriana has already been engaged in hair winding before, so why not repeat it now? However, when she entered the fork into the socket, the phone slipped out of his hands and scattered on the floor. In the past life, it happened, and then, lifting the phone, she got a burn. This time, everything turned out to be perfect. No trace appeared on the hand. This indicated that the past could still be changed. Parker reported that he had already gone on the way. Instead of empty hands, he has a pleasant gift. 10 years ago, this gift was Lucy, the one with which he just agreed to sit and taste the chicken. This memory enlivens a charming and exciting thought. But why should she deny the rapprochement of these two? They are extremely well together, enjoying every minute of communication. Consciousness was fast and ruthless. Let them stay together because it is no longer needed. And so Charlie was already waiting in a cafe, surrounded by people who seemed to be absolutely indifferent to her problems. Finally, Parker and Lucy appeared together, radiating true happiness surrounded by each other. When placing an order, the girl did not think about her desires, but focused on how annoying her girlfriend. Lucy's earrings also did not go unnoticed. She handed identical jewelry to her girlfriends, but only one of them was elected. And it turned out that Charlie could not be responsible. The traitor was fun, talking about a strong friendship that unites them, and about a common passion for exactly the same things. Lucy could not help but emphasize that Charlie turned into a real beauty, while she remains the one in the 5th grade, although her inner beauty and joy were always visible to everyone. The girlfriend could not refrain from comparison. Her tiny ladon awakened the association with the majestic Parker hand. They enjoyed the drinks together, but the main character was determined to expose their tricks and no longer allow a drop of lie or treacherous schemes. Finally, they brought the chicken, and Charlie gladly started to eat, though Lucy curled up. Here she is. A lie. Last time a girlfriend ate as many as 3 portions, and now she was scurrying in front of the Parker. The fragile balance was broken by an unexpected incident. A drunken visitor accidentally pushed the waitress. The hot vessel barely touched Charlie's hands, and only the miracle prevented her from contaminating her. However, the worst thing was not this, but that the fence was where it was left in the past life. The girl rejected the hypocritical help of her girlfriend and quickly went to the toilet. There, holding her hand under cold water, she, covered with despair, was thinking that old events seemed to be repeated. No, it will not allow life to break it again. Meanwhile, Lucy was already under the influence of alcohol. One rust was enough for her to be intoxicated. Her face shone with a bright blush, and behavior became alive and carefree. Charlie immediately came to the conclusion that only 3 to 4 rumka was enough to completely remove the friend from the balance. Parker constantly added alcohol to her, at the same time tirelessly telling her that her kindness and hard work were struck. All this was incredibly annoyed. And of course, the heroine did not have a ceremony with a girlfriend who brazenly demanded her to be fed fish. In the end, the girl could no longer tolerate the situation and finally decided to take her away. Looking at the driving taxi, Charlie enjoyed the idea of how wonderful to be a wrapped silence and peace again. Parker, covered by loneliness, drowned in sadness. A cheerful atmosphere always prevailed with her. She laughed and empty. In the meantime, his girl seemed not from this world. In addition, he did not miss the opportunity to note that his ex-girl was extremely sweet and slim. Left to, they continued to enjoy the drinks. Charlie frankly confessed that she did not come for a hearty dinner, but for pizza. As soon as she removed his glasses, her beautiful face blossomed in all its beauty, which immediately left Parker indifferent. He immediately proclaimed his admiration. It turned out that the overestimated cost of the operation restrains the heroine from laser vision correction. She hoped that she would soon receive a well-deserved salary increase. So, when left to, they tied tirelessly, discussing not only the stocks, but also about everything else that came into the field of their interests. Finally, Parker escorted her, gently wished for good night. On farewell, he gently kissed Charlie in his forehead. It was the most restrained gesture that could happen, but it was not necessary to open it. After returning, the girl received many messages where the guy explained in detail what actions and how to invest. This is what she needed. The day off came, and Charlie decided to avoid meeting with the Parker. Instead, she visited the bookstore. Her task was to choose books about trade, although for an inexperienced reader, they seemed too difficult to understand. The top shelf should have a book that met more needs, but it was too high, which complicated it. Fortunately, a tall man quickly came to the heroine for help. This man was a manager, Jeremy, who came to the conclusion that the girl decided to be released because her interest in the actions testified to it. Charlie rushed to conquer him. Of course, not because she wanted to change something, but simply because of curiosity. She wanted to find out what her boyfriend was doing. Nothing more. At some point, the manager began to speak, seeking to make the girl an offer, but she sharply interrupted him, saying that she had no desire to go somewhere on the weekend. That is why she asks him not to inform Parker of her participation. Jeremy did not linger on unnecessary chats, but simply made a sincere compliment to her earrings. Finally, Charlie chose another gift from Lucy, exactly what was more in line with her desires. Of course, she always realized that those earrings did not become the best choice. Charlie came to work with extraordinary morning vigilance, enjoying the idea of how wonderful to be the first to appear in the office. However, it was unexpectedly revealed that Jeremy had already entered her office. The manager was dozing in his workplace, and his face, devoid of glasses, looked even more sophisticated and well-groomed. The girl's presence woke him up, instantly depriving the magic of his sleep. Going to work, Charlie remembered how the manager turned to her by his name, omitting the usual form of politeness that surprised her. However, not something that surprised, the surprise of the manager. After all, she came to do her business. Focusing on Parker's statements and notes, Kara began to actively redeem the shares. Suddenly, the work was stopped, and a glass of coffee was quietly near the keyboard. The manager was buzzing with a cup of American and sandwich. Charlie's first thought was to give up this unwanted care, because everything seemed extremely familiar to him. However, this habit was detrimental and grueling, so the girl decided to break her in her new life with her and gladly accepted a pleasant surprise. The time passed, and finally the stocks were purchased, with a lot of money invested in successful and promising companies. By this time, there were other employees, including Lucy and Parker, who, no doubt, came together. The girlfriend, radiating the usual joy, moved to Charlie, but stopped her promptly, insisting on the official format of communication at work. He thought from what time Charlie gave up the usual cappuccino in favor of Americano. The girl mentioned the manager, and in his internal considerations, the conclusion arose that, unlike Parker, the manager is not a sweet maniac. Finally, the guy took his seat at the computer. It is time to start buying stocks. However, he sold all the shares of a pharmaceutical company, which seemed to soon have to make considerable profit. Why did he do it? Subsequently, Charlie's plans began to fall apart. If someone had warned Charlie that her plan would be so instantly disintegrated into debris, she would never believe. However, she clearly saw the sell button on the boy's screen. Thoughts flew before her consciousness one by one. This company has already made a profit and had to continue to generate profits with each percentage. So what went wrong? Despair was ready to fully seize it. Parker himself snatched a girl from a deepening into her hard thoughts. Why is she so serious? It turned out that he sold the shares because he had already received a profit and sought to invest in the company MVA, which is engaged in advanced technologies. Parker insisted that it was secret, giving news as grand secret information. But Charlie, who started her second life without him, already perfectly understood how promising the company was. There was nothing like this before. The girl was finally convinced that events can be changed, and these changes will affect not only her, but everyone. In any case, it is still prematurely quarreling with the Parker. At the same time, inviting him to taste the dishes in the dining room. Rumors show that it is where they are served with an incredibly delicious chicken. Of course, everything happens that they will go to eat together. From their best girlfriend, do not escape. In addition, its presence caused not a very pleasant compliment. Was it a new blouse on it today? Much more attractive than the usual outfit? What ended our story in the past life, yeah? It is clear that the blouse did not come out as expected. Lucy suddenly spoiled it, pouring a whole plate of bright red soup on it. After that, she never wore her again. And here they were in the dining room again. The girlfriend again asks her to pour her more soup. It is incredibly unpleasant to watch this when it is clear for what purpose it turns to the cook. So, Lucy rotates. It is time to be alert. 3, 2, 1. It will not allow the cell to be repeated under any circumstances. It's time to move away. Oh, it seems the soup did not get there that Lucy was expecting. Her shirt is already hopelessly spoiled. However, it is worth noting that this is a completely different shirt. The girl was stunned. No one would have suggested that her beloved Parker would suffer such bad weather. There was a huge, almost unintessed spot on his chest. The young man jumped, trying to give a smile and convince himself that nothing evil happened. But honestly, he was really sorry for losing such a valuable shirt. It's time to send Lucia for napkins, and at the same time enjoy its embarrassed look. After all, not she, but Charlie ran to the toilet. She tried to hide it, but it was still noticeable. The girl was extremely dissatisfied with the consequences of her diversion. Charlie also went to the toilet to wash her hands and never suspected that this place could turn into unexpected events. However, the unexpected turn of the events did not wait. An unknown girl shouted desperately from one of the cabins. Of course, the heroine could not refuse the stranger and brought her a skeleton in her jacket so that she could cover up when it was needed. Utah, a young employee who recently joined the team with Lucy, found herself in the maze of unfortunate circumstances. She seems to be extremely grateful for her rescue and began to call Charlie her angel. However, such vivid positive emotions were quite clear. It turned out that some time ago, another girl who went to the toilet was grossly refusing to assist. Unlike the other, Charlie revealed a great kindness and responded to the help of a person who was at risk of missing lunch. And with him, All the rest of the working day, Lucy did not waste a moment. She made every effort to forget Parker who and how to ruin his shirt, and constantly boasted her extraordinary response. Undoubtedly, it was extremely nice for a young man to be near her. In addition, they discussed and charm, albeit not in the greatest light. Again, it came to the fore how different it was from Ludima in school times, as well as a tireless help to her Lucy. Parker may have felt a little more pleasure in her presence. If he saw at least once, she had been torn the napkins 10 minutes ago during cleaning. By the way, Lucia was the person who refused to come to the aid of Yutai. She escaped from the toilet with a deafening blow to the door and quietly thought the situation with a real circus. Oh, which is incredible generosity. But now she instantly changed her mask to a friendly mask because you cannot look rude in front of the Parker. It is not unacceptable. Charlie returned, and with her, Utah appeared, which became a real surprise for all present. Lucy barely had time to hide the expression of the surprise that immediately appeared on her face. What time did these two become friends? However, it is simply impossible to refuse sitting together at the table. Utah vividly enlivened the company at the table. She did not hesitate to laugh loudly and frankly express her emotions, instantly attracting the attention of everyone around. She again reminded Parker of a spoiled shirt, forcing Lucy's hair to get up. To change the topic, she began to pay attention to how many new acquaintances tied in Charles. The arrow, like a butterfly, flew through the space and plunged into the milk. The girl did not worry at all because of her luxurious appetite, because she believed in a healthy body, a healthy spirit. Lucy was convinced that her appearance was incredibly imperfect. Without holding back the cockroach, she asked the question, what did Grandpa Jutt, who instilled in her such beliefs? He worked as a seller and cook, not the most prestigious professions, but it did not worry about it. It's time to say goodbye. And what lunch can be without aromatic coffee? Utah chose a classic American, while Lucina, covered by a wave of friendliness, asked to buy cappuccino. Charlie pushed her hand with a distinct disgust. She was much more concerned about the approval of a new girlfriend than the false sophistication of the old one. She left, and after such an act, one could not feel any regret. As soon as the Yen and Lucy remained alone, their attention was immediately attracted by Charlie's sweatshirt. It was at this point that Lucy learned the story of how everything happened. Unfortunately, she struck her breath. Though he could even help her mother, because it did not cost her a penny. Nothing. You can always confirm that you are a really beautiful girl. Charlie did so, because she constantly climbed into other people's affairs. Was incredibly annoying, wasn't he? Utah is more careful to treat her because it is likely that someone will be able to know her much deeper than her girlfriends do. Fint failed. Lucy instantly reminded that it is also absolutely inappropriate to ask about other people's relatives. In addition, the girl was well aware that it was she who refused to help and came out, decisively closing the door. It seems that this new girlfriend is not as simple as it looks at first glance. And what if she began to spread rumors? The help came from the side where it was expected. A good-natured thickness, as if appearing from nowhere, he sharply approached the situation. The head of the Smith department glowed with happiness through a meeting and instantly, without doubt, accepted a compliment to his tie. Lucy did not suffer silently. She frankly condemned not only the heartlessness of those stand, but also the indifference of Janin. Ha! She will throw them out of the game before they understand what she represents. Smith was incredibly indignant. How can he treat such a beauty, a truly priceless employee? While he was burning righteous indignation, she carefully weighed the next steps, and in her mind, the calculations were heard. And by the way, why not offer the boss to drink together? At this point, she was felt placed in a cafe. Before what girlfriends were asked, she decided to add the guy herself to hand them over the lunch. Everything was convinced in one thing. The world is changed. She will no longer allow herself to sink into pain that covered her former life. And Jerems was falling back in his chair again, as if a sign of grueling fatigue slowly absorbed him. This fragile moment was unexpectedly disrupted. Parker flew into the office and sharply grabbed Charlie by his hand, intending to take her behind. It is clear that she does not plan to go somewhere when he behaves that way. Help suddenly appeared at the right moment. Jeremy woke up and forced Parkera to stop. Again, it turned out to be in the disadvantageous light before the leadership. It seems that the management is barely restrained so as not to harm him because he has already taken a step to raise his hand. Farker was so angry that even his body was barely recognized, and Jeremy almost stopped his time with a cold look. As it was foreseen, the one who held a lower position was defeated in the competition. The chief only had to thank the applause. Charlie only remained. Did Jeremiah be angry because she woke him up and again raised her problems to show people? In addition, she had to deal with Aslam, as if with a crushed Parker. His evil face again caused memories of how he shouted in the past, covered with absolutely incomprehensible hatred. This again caused memories of the moments when he brutally beat her. Is everything repeated? And though nothing was threatened here and now, the feeling of terrible discomfort has enveloped everything around. However, the Yanian did not leave the situation indifferent. Her gentle, friendly hand went down to her shoulder, giving reassuring. They decided to brew tea because the coffee seemed too heavy for this moment. How invaluable support is when it is most needed. However, Charlie still decided to explain that she just plunged into work. She is now getting support and ready to provide it, although in the past they have no friendly relationships. And Yanin has already exhausted numerous humiliations by the chief of Smith. Once she was so absorbed by her own thoughts that there were truly good people near her, whom she did not even know. Utah sincerely thanked for coffee, radiating warmth and joy. Although she was only given a simple cup, everyone was delighted with the photo of your girl without holding back only passionate exclamations. Ah, what she is extremely sweet. While everyone carefully took care of the baby, Luz remained asleep. As soon as she turned to that company, everyone was instantly ranked in their business. In fact, the reason for this step was in the appearance of a blur. But who will say that? Although they hurried where their way. But the chief saw clearly how they showed an unbearable. It's time to go. But Charlie was overflowing with fear. Will Parker really wait for her at home? And she knows it perfectly. However, you can wait a little while doing the toilet where no one will distract it. Half an hour is enough for him to go. Perhaps, however, this is not enough for him to go with Germa. He seems to have been waiting for her. Leggerly will not give up his proposal to bring her. No, she will definitely not give up, though the situation seems a little inconvenient. Previously, such closeness never occurred between them. Interestingly, a woman's lipstick was found in the car. Who's she? Maybe it belongs to one of the girls? Of course, it would be strange if, unlike handsome Jerry, I also had girls. And Parker waited patiently, remaining all this time in the parking lot of Viachar. When they passed, she did not stay. Immediately hid her face, turning away from the window with an expression of pure fear. The glass is already tonic, said her chief, who immediately noted her obvious nervousness. She hurried home, and he stayed for a few minutes in the open door, watching her departure carefully. Sitting to the car, Joram took a call. The main purpose was to give up something to do and meet something, citing fatigue. While Charlie, Jeremy, and Parker felt sad for various reasons, someone else enjoyed every moment of life. This was the chief of Smith, who with an incredible passion took advantage of the unique opportunity to drink in the company of beauty. Lucy was not nice near him, but she was used to it. They will drink a little more and then a little more. Then she will again inform him that Janan and Utes are unjust, although she always shows extraordinary kindness to them. And then the Chief Smith again curled his face, taking the appearance of righteous anger. And here she, politely hiding her mouth with her hand, tilt another Ruma and thinks how unbearable it is for this old man. At home, Charlie remembered what she was lucky to get support from Jeremy. Parker called constantly, and I refused to put up with his indifference to communication. Charlie eventually lifted the tube. She understood in advance that she would not hear anything pleasant, but she still needed him now. Subsequently, it will necessarily change the number. During a conversation with a guy, she, angry, squeezed a towel. What should she have to defend her position because she purchased coffee for Jeremy? The phone with a frantic force crashed into the wall. Now it is simply impossible to talk to him. Love. Parker assures her that his feelings are endless. But did he really love his own? She had people who sincerely took care of her, and besides them, the world did not know another face. Yanian's assistant, one of those who sincerely cared for, should leave his position soon. How could you forget about it? The head of Smith was so strongly beat her that she could not withstand the diligent and patient worker. She applied for dismissal. This cannot be allowed. It seemed that returning home after difficulties had to give Yanin real pleasure. The little daughter ran up to her, crossing her tiny legs funny, and it really was the best in the world. However, this man was skillfully opposed to the world. He was fired from work and now spends time at home. He did not even want to dress his daughter or change her diapers, constantly complained and translated into all the troubles to his wife. Returning home, he had to take responsibility for the child and work overtime at the same time. As if feeling maternal emotion, the little girl began to cry sadly. I had to put it. The Janian was gently told the child a fascinating tale of a wonderful life and true love that she once dreamed of. She decided to take a little nap and did not even notice how a thin blood flow began to drip her nose. The next day, at work, the girl, as you could expect, was met. Cricken, Twisted, and Chief Lucy. He rejected her report and the dirt of her sharp images, and he could not explain what exactly the disadvantage of the document was. He shouted constantly, and because of this, Charlie began to worry. However, Lucy smiled unwavering. Her plan worked, and every culprit received a well-deserved punishment. Finally, the humiliated Janin slowly departed to her workplace to carefully recycle the report. Charlie could not allow her to remain in this condition, so she immediately went for her. Blood flowed from the girl's nose again, but she was ready to finally process her business if necessary for her daughter. And so, Charlie put forward the idea that could seem a manifestation of madness. There is no need to recycle the report. It was an extremely bold idea. Does the chief do not immediately pick up if you only change the cover and the font? However, Charlie, without hesitation, has assumed all responsibility. She died. Can something be worse? In addition, the girl handed her friend a voice recorder to fix each low image of Smith. At the same time, he does not do his business at all, but only screams loudly and shifts responsibility to others. Here is Utah. Bending his back, he listens to another avalanche. A little more and it will be transferred to another department. Far from this futile humiliation. It was still striking that the chief of SMI behaved in the same way exclusively in the absence of Jeremy. Looking at him, Charlie could not wait for the moment when he would take the place of her new girlfriends. And what happened in a few days? The Chief Smith again raised his voice to the so-called incorrectly drafted work plan, and the next day everything was repeated, and every other day again and then continuously. With each new company, his mouth opened more and to be nearby became increasingly reflected. Just a week later, a plan was approved, which actually improved only the cover and the font. At that moment, Janin realized that she could safely trust her friend and support her ideas. Charlie had her own idea that she planned to put into practice. All you had to do is carry out a small fraud with original documents and their unsubstantiated copies. It is now time to act. It was at the moment when she passed the necessary copy. Utah brought a huge amount of coffee. The Chief Smith did not raise his voice on her for spending working time on the hoods. In addition, where does it come from so many mugs? Appearing with the jerks, he immediately reported that he had left his map and asked the girl to organize delivery. Frisovis was surprised. He had never given his map to anyone before. Lucy, with a clear disappointment, frowned. Why are I wonder me? What is the attention? However, the collection was much more important than coffee. While looking at the report, Jeremy noted that the pages are arranged in a chaotic order. He later realized that only a long copy of the document before him. The head of Smith spanned and immediately submitted another copy of the document, sharply harassing his negligent employees. He had to invent an explanation urgently why he rejected the alternative options and skillfully convinced that guilt lies on the shoulders of his employees. However, it turned out that the documents are completely the same. At this point, Charlie inserted, saying that she had given a false copy and sincerely asked for an apology. The Chief Delos Smith took a deep breath for a moment to start explaining to Jerem how he was about to punish that laborer. Undoubtedly, it is guilty of all the problems. Only she and no one else can be involved. How can you condemn him for something when all the evidence testifies to her? Yes, you can. Jeremy Chetka clearly made it clear that he assumes the main responsibility for the department staff and documents. The old man sought so much that it seemed as if he literally became smaller. The head of the Smith department will have to do all the work on their own in one day. I have not in vain met with your look. Here it is, real karma. Smiths and Lucy did not establish visual contact, but both felt a wave of joint disappointment. After the meeting, Lucy was in no hurry to remind Charlie of the meeting planned for the 4th number. Unconditionally, she remembered that meeting. This moment will remain in her memory forever, will never wise, will never disappear. It was one of the most difficult memories of her past, which is forever reflected in her soul. She was confidently heading, hoping to meet Lucy, but instead found herself among the graduates. She was not expected there, and I did not meet any soul that could please. Only Lucy, as always, demonstrated the stamp of happiness by the willpower leading it to the table. It was on this day, while in the toilet, that she accidentally listened to the conversation of former classmates. Everyone discussed how the fox expressed sympathy for a vain charm, which was negligently stuck to her, and how they would never agree to be friends with her. No, the girl did not nourish the illusions about her attitude. However, it was extremely painful. When she came out of the toilet, the cafe was empty. Everyone went out, even Lucy, which she relied on. She met only one completely unexpected young man who once occupied an important place in her life. Immersed in deep reflections, the girl unexpectedly woke up the voice of Utah. She suggested quickly looking at several stores, and on the same day, and Charles had an important meeting. In the morning, when she had enough free time, she decided to visit. Satisfied, Utah elegantly proceeded to tint lips using Madelais style. Is it? Yes. This tube was in Jeremy's car. These two are a real couple who hides their relationships to avoid gossip in a circle of acquaintances. However, they are so different, like fire and ice. Didn't this opposite be able to unite them? It was enough to remember the sun, how his ray appeared, and Jeremy could not restrain. Are they already disappearing? Utah only sighed, saying that she was not her business, and quickly led Charlie further. Oh, what are the benefits of this relationship? Jeremiah had no other choice. She only had to breathe hard. On the day of the meeting, Charlie graduates finally decided to try the lenses from a well-known company instead of her usual glasses. Her face was completely open, and the elegant black frame emphasized the incredible appeal. Only she rested that even Jeremy, without glasses, was incredibly attractive, and Utah immediately bounced, as if struck by a current. Is she not to hear compliments about her boyfriend? When the girls came to the salon, the carrier of the carrier immediately evaluated Charlie and identified the main directions of work. The hair was carefully twisted on a bipuda, and the makeup appeared on his face instantly when a hairdryer worked. And again, Utah rises from the grip, and the craftsman, proud of his creation, gently wipes the picture next to the salt. Charlie, fully confident in herself, talks on the phone and claims that he will definitely come to a meeting with Cluse. At this meeting, all participants gathered, and everyone, without exception, remembered the main character, always resorting to bad comments. No one believed rumors that Charlie's appearance had improved. However, everyone clearly acknowledged that it was thanks to Lucy that she was invited to internship. And here she entered the hall. Someone seemed to be intentionally aiming at her bright light at this moment. Simoleus was left without words as soon as her eyes were first met with a girlfriend's gaze. The table instantly prevailed. They did not expect it at all. Charlie looked like a real model in her new outfit and with updated makeup. She sat down at the table as if she did not expect to meet such large crowds. Lucy quickly corrected the expression and joined the girl who was in the arms, praise her carefully. However, changes in appearance did not bring more warmth to classmates. The girls still whispered the events, expressing their dissatisfaction with discharge. However, one of the boys jumped into Charlie, showing incredible hospitality and magic. Once upon a time, this person was the most famous burial, organizing systematic harassment. Now he has changed completely. He gave the girl affectionate compliments and laughed with the Sergei Lucy. Ha ha, as if his mother went crazy. Charlie, they are completely different. But it is not time to relax. It is time to visit the toilet and finally deal with the hatred of classmates. Here she is, the third cabin on the left. Charlie remembered all these details as her own name. She remembered as if in a moment, and for an unknown reason, the whole class began to hate it. Now is the time to find out what Lucy said, because otherwise this incident will remain with her forever. There was almost no violation of privacy due to messages from Jeremy. What, after all, does he seek from her? A day off? But it does not matter. The former classmates who are now actively chatting are included in the toilet. How could she dare to come, even so beautifully put in order? At school, she was told that Charlie was a traitor. And now she brazenly demonstrates her courage, choosing the same earrings as unhappy Lucy. No, it is enough to sit away and be silent. It's time to get to the fore and find out the truth. The truth was shocking when it turned out that it was Lucy's relationship. Then she did not restrain her girlfriend from confession to the boy. It was Lucy at that moment that actively distributed slander to his address. At that time, Charlie frankly confessed, and in his words, there was neither lies nor envy. However, she had something to say. She assured the girls that this never happened and that Lucy should be blamed for love and betrayal. She had unquestionable evidence. A business card lay in a brand new red handbag. Former classmates immediately rushed to consider it. Yes, she is real. However, such things provide only the employees of the company and in no trainees. Charlie decided to sharpen the situation, saying that a handbag of one of the girls was a fake. She was inflamed and offended, but that's what it was needed. Is it possible to enjoy the fact that he was on the side of the one who had been unjustly humiliated at school for years? She went to the exit, no longer wanting to meet them. Let them think better about her words. Behind the door, she ran, like a guard Lucy, decisively to find out what they had been talking about her all this time. Charlov remembered Jew. Good Libchev. One day, having received a confession in love, he changed radically and stopped any communication with her. Today, he was late for a meeting of graduates and approaching the coffee shop. At that moment, Charlie came out of there. She almost rushed past, softly wiping the tears of ancient image. However, he recognized her and called. He still preserved the same charming appeal that once fascinated it. He frankly stated that he was tirelessly looking for her. At this point, she did not feel any heat. She was asked questions about the long-standing lies she led regarding her classmate. Charlie was amazed at Hugh's confession, but she could not understand why he was looking for it and for what purpose he wanted to speak. At the same time, a manager, Jeremy Carr, approached the event. New shock. How does he know where to look for her? And how did he realize that she was leaving a meeting? After a minute, Charlie made his decision and immediately moved to the chief's car. Looking over her shoulder and seeing how the manager closes the door behind her, Hugh shouted, prompting her to check the forum immediately. Undoubtedly, it aroused Charlie, and even more, she was scared of how the manager found it. It turned out that he paid attention to her by accident and, moreover, had already resolved all the working issues that worried her. The girl, crowded with sincere warm feelings, said, "Thank you. What happened to Lucy at this moment?" She was pressed against the wall, driven into a corner. It was required by a business card. But how could they know that she was only a trainee if she hid it even from her parents? Former girlfriends finally realized that the promises for successful employment were only a fiction, and the only one who was telling the truth was Charlie. Lucy was wrapped in fresh lies, and with her the old diaper disappeared. Those who survived the entire spooky situation began to accuse her of the fact that her lies provoked Charlie's poisoning. Attempts to justify themselves became even worse than before. But who accuses others of this situation? Lucy exclaimed desperately. "It's Anin." They were guilty of everything, although she begged them to stop harassing. But all this turned out to be in vain and pathetic. It remained alone, showered with fragments of toilet tiles thrown by ancient friends. It was this Charlie who had to cry alone, taking on all the blows, so Lucy seemed to seem good. When Lagunya finally gained strength and left the toilet, there was no one left in the hall. Everyone had already left. Charles, at this point, did not feel emotional shock at all. Suddenly, she fell asleep directly in the manager's car. She dreamed of a sasson, in which, as always, classmates fired at her with various debris. Then Hai sat next to her at the desk, smiling widely, as if he really rejoiced. He bravely defended her from attacks, and after that no one ever threw garbage in Charles. She was attracted to such unusual attention, from which she inevitably fell in love with the friendly president of the student council. On the advice of Lucy, she wrote a confession and gently put him in the haylock. But when he got acquainted with the letter, she realized what a huge mistake she made. The new moon was angry and ordered her to stay far away from him. On that day, Charles realized how pathetic and no one was needed. Waking up, she was still crying. But she was no longer in the walls of the school. Now she was sitting in a manager's car, wrapped in his jacket. She quietly showered all 3 hours, and throughout this time, he did not even awaken her. Frightened and embarrassed by the fact that she created inconvenience for the manager, she started to leave the car, but he did not allow her to do it. Did Parker wait again in the parking lot? However, this seemed slightly less significant than the news of the Charlie manager, especially given that it was at that moment that the guy took a place in the car and went. Suddenly, the manager asked a strange question. Does she like Parker? However, this is not his business at all, because she, without a doubt, loves him. They meet. Could this moment become even more uncomfortable? Finally, Charlie managed to leave the car. Meanwhile, Jermina, upset, heard, squeezed, and let go. However, quarrels are not the best thing. The girl decided to point out that he was incredibly attractive without glasses. The company manager did not share the admiration and immediately noted that the new blouse simply did not fit her. However, as soon as the door closed, he stretched a little nervously to weaken the tie. She smiled gently because she considered him attractive. But why did the girl cry? Is it even a guy? He was famous as a real Damachos, and Jeremy could not silently watch Parker frankly flirting directly in the eyes of the whole department. The car immediately broke out of place, vigorously reflecting the anger of its owner. Was the gift at home? This circumstance opened a great opportunity to visit the ancient forum. And look, so many messages, and they are all from Hugh. He corresponded to her throughout these years. Suddenly, the phones rang. The call came from the company. one of those girls with whom they communicated in the toilet just a few hours ago. She apologized, noting that each of their act was caused only by a clear, reckless belief in the glory of Luce. And now they are fully aware of how mistaken. For the first time in a long time, Charlie's eyes were filled with tears of joy. She could not imagine that one of them was dared to call. She did not look for their company, but always found the strength to forgive them, which had already filled them with joy. Together with them, there was a Gug who sought to meet Charlie. The next day, the office filled the hot aura of the delight that wrapped Oot, who seemed extremely beautiful, her friend in a brand new blouse. Its beauty shone as if covered with the luster of a mast, emphasized by a light blush of embarrassment. He gave up glasses, choosing contact lenses. They met, shining with unique beauty, like the real main characters of the drama. These changes did not go unnoticed by Parker. Earlier, he never saw Charlie as radically reincarnated, and now her new image just undoubtedly impressed him. Leaving behind a dissatisfied girlfriend, he hurried to his girlfriend. Lucy could not hide her annoyance, and, annoyed, departed, along with Tuchak Claus. Varker did not pay attention to it. He threw Charlie compliments, invited it to a cafe, and jealous to Jeremy. However, she refused to go with him at the cafe, choosing a meeting with Hugh instead. The young man was already waiting for her, carefully preparing coffee and confession in the love that withstood the test for years. He was aware that a guy had already appeared in her life, so he suggested that only friendly relationships. It turned out that many years ago, Lucy replaced sincere confessions in love with an offensive letter. But the true essence of events was revealed too late. You turned into a truly wonderful person. If you were not Emile, who knows, they may have long been married. Another young man shook her near the house. It looks like it was Jeremy again. For the second time, he asked if she really loves Parker's lit girls, and that she kept them together. However, this time her annoyance became apparent, and she sharply stated that it was not his business. The manager noticed that she evades her boyfriend and feeds on him. Can it be called true love? Jerma does not stand seeing her eyes slowly filled with tears. However, when he heard this, Charlie felt the rush of rage first. And what do you could think of her girl Utah about such perturbation? According to the reaction, the managers were obvious that these words put him in a rather difficult situation. However, the situation has become much more complicated because Utah is his sister. They tried not to show it publicly, but Jeremy perceived it, like everyone else. He did not have any girl, but there was one person who always attracted his attention. After Charlie left, Jeremy was forced to call her sister and announce that their secret is now known to another person. Utah was dissatisfied with this situation, but she was even more concerned that her brother should be near Charlie, at least in order not to be with a Parker, a traitor and a minister. Every day, she saw it easily flirted with Lucy and felt her immune to such behavior. Returning home, they were so exhausted that she couldn't do anything but just collapse. She was tormented by thoughts. Why were there no people who have now in the past? If she were a little more bold and attentive for those who criticized it, everything would have turned out differently. But this time they will receive on merit. The next morning, Charlie pleased Parker with breakfast, which she brought to the office and shared as she fell asleep without strength. Their conversation was interrupted by Olya, as always incredibly cheerful and fun. As it turned out, yesterday they went for a walk with the Parker. However, it didn't matter to Charles. She fully focused on the boy who was enthusiastically celebrated her new image and invited to a date. Olus, you probably desperately want to take possession of the Parker and is ready for everything for it. In fact, you are just a rat that fusses in a maze, carefully designed specifically for you. However, this is a completely different story. Utah radiates light and openness. The usual start of the working morning was unexpectedly broken. Jerome invited everyone to join Yanin's greetings with the successful completion of the project, which received approval, and had to move to the implementation stage soon. The leader Smith could not even pretend to be rejoicing for the girl, as corporate ethics insisted on. I have not yet started work because thoughts about possible increase take my consciousness. She may be able to afford a little more. But how to raise a daughter when workloads are almost left for her? Winter Litiate is ready for anything. After a while, Janin spoke with Charlie, discussing the possibility of including Lucy in the project team. At first, it seemed that Charlie acted solely to support the advance of his girlfriend, but his true plan was completely different. If Lucy joins them, the friendly leader Smith will not be an obstacle to the implementation of the project. A meeting dedicated to the discussion of a new and promising MS Yanin. Derek from the production department presented beta of the product, while other participants reported their roles in the project. Without focusing on the meeting, Lucy flirted with the Parker flirtingly. However, her sublime mood was immediately crashed when it was found out that her task would be a survey of visitors at the entrance. It seemed to be the safest position that she could have been offered. Without delay, the girl quickly agreed after the words of Yanin, who noted that this opportunity could be a step to her official employment. Nothing seemed to be more humiliating than to act in this absurd form and to swing this meaningless flag. Nothing, she will still return to the game. It turned out that the work is not as difficult as it seems. You can enjoy the game on your phone while the buyers understand the situation on their own. And what to do with samples? When Lucy was asked if she was contained in one of the samples, she barely lifted her gaze and confidently answered that he was not. The man who tasted the offered product immediately felt a sharp deterioration of state of health. Only the noise annoyed Lucy, and in general, they needed to think that they were pouring into their mouths. The man was allergic to peanuts, and soon a crowd gathered around him, watching him gasping. What did Lucy do? Of course, she began to blame this man of everything, not taking into account that only a few minutes ago she provided false information. When Parker ran out to the scene, anger and horror engulfed him so that his face, almost merging with silently white walls, seemed like a creation of strong emotional tension. If they are probably not, they should go to the hospital immediately and, together with Lucy, apologize for everything that happened. As she is grateful to him for now that he does not have to take the consequences of her actions. He gladly acts as the reliable support that she needs so much. Of course, he will never leave such gentle and defenseless, because it needs his care and support. After all that happened, Parker called Charlie to find out if she warned Lucy that one of the samples had an allergen. Of course, she warned, but as always, her words were left unattended. I didn't go home that evening. You know that she was waiting for her much more pleasant atmosphere than usual. Today, her parents were engaged in help with his granddaughter, which testified to her flawless appearance, and the kitchen was filled with a seductive aroma of delicious dishes. In such circumstances, it was possible to accept the bath quietly, dispelling all the worries of the last day. Although it was impossible to get rid of them completely, there was a conversation with Charlie unexpectedly. They were advised to tell her parents openly that the soul was suffering from work for a long time, that her husband has released from work, and she remains at home for a long time because no one helps her with her baby. I did not spend a lot of time on doubt, but now it seemed to her parents. As soon as she came out of her shower, a man struck her, clearly dissatisfied with the fact that she was dared to call her parents and take care of his granddaughter. However, today, for the first time in a long time, she remained indifferent to his outrageous exclamations. In the house, his parents have no right to raise his voice or resort to violence. In the end, she lives in her apartment, which she pays for herself, and if she wants, she can easily evict it. Charlie heard with great pleasure that her words were true, and the life of Janin began to slowly but confidently adjust. In the office, she suddenly met the manager. He seemed to have already left him, however, for unknown reasons. He overcame a significant way to appear here. It turned out that his goal was to invite Charlie for coffee and to give her a certain message. To guess that she has an unexpected surprise in her new coffee shop. Oh, what does he do here? The young man only recently opened this coffee shop, trying to be closer to Charlie, and as fate was, she came here with Jerry. Tensions prevailed between the two. Charlie was puzzled and did not know how to act. Obviously, it was far from the best situation that men could face. They were able to remember each other, although all this happened solely due to the genuine benevolence of Hugh. After a few minutes, she, nervously looking, could not understand why everything was so strange. Charlie explained that she knew this man from the school years because he was her former classmate, and assured that she had no idea honestly that he was working here. Finally, the cases began to gain momentum. The manager reported that during his departure, the duties would temporarily pass Smith, but he made sure that Miss Yanin's project was overlooked by this old man and immediately got to the highest leadership because everyone knows that there is always a tension between them. How incredibly it was. In addition, Char realized that the next mistake by Mr. Smith would, no doubt, strike a serious blow to his position, salary, or even irreversibly blowing up his vanity. Returning to her workplace, she noticed through a glass partition that Utis headed the department. He smiled brazenly in the face, and her expression clearly testified to dissatisfaction. The girl immediately confessed to her friend that the morning was not too successful. The head of the media insisted that she hand over a project to him, which she worked tirelessly for a long time. When he called her, she already felt something unfavorable. But when he calls her for some joy, elderly, arrogantly, and confidently stated, She had no experience to cope with the international project she was engaged. The only way was to pass the project to him. Utah did not belong to the cowards and declined strongly, but the chief did not hesitate to resort to blackmail, frankly stating that her chance to get his job would depend on his characteristics. She decided that even in such conditions, it is much better to cope on her own. Products made in accordance with the principles of Halls are an extremely promising idea. The project undoubtedly deserves attention. Despite all the expectations, Charlie suggested that you trust her project and pass it on Mr. Smith. It will return it later, but it is best to allow the project to go freely. The project management was quite satisfied. The head of DeLomertail was very pleased with how skillfully organized the work. In his dream world, he represented himself rich and famous, and Lucy married him, shining from love and unspeakable happiness. Due to the launch of Mr. Smith's project, the Michianen initiative was temporarily suspended. However, Charlie tirelessly assured that for a long time to spend time on the riverbank, so sooner or later its enemy will float with the waters of your enemy. However, he will not achieve it. The appearance of the body should be caused, and without a doubt, they have already chosen the way to this goal. Charlie reported a report on Mr. Smith's project, hoping that it would be useful to him. Will contribute to immersion as deep as possible for a person, which still has at least a drop of conscience. He did not know about the treacherous plans of his employees and sincerely believed that after his cry, they actually wanted him good luck. Charlie assured him that they would become the first founders of the Halil phenomenon in Korea. Oh, how happy Mr. Smith was. He already imagined everyone ceased to perceive him as an annoying elder and began to see real authority in it. The management actively supported the project, which caused the rapid increase in the price of shares. At official and informal meetings in connection with the success of the project, there were no bottles of alcohol. This peculiar Mr. Smith shone in a brandy suit like a spring cherry and was gently assured that he would acquire a lucky milk. The morning was fateful, but not what the man hoped for. Only he dissolved the door, as suddenly a folder with documents like a bold wind struck it directly in the face. It turned out that a group of Korean volunteers was abducted by the Shorts, and against this background, the value of the shares fell like a stone in the abyss. Mr. Smith had to find a way out of the situation urgently, so he suggested to translate all responsibility to YouTube, publishing an article with her apologies. A girl who impresses with her courage is what a screaming headline. All responsibility will fall on it, and the whole company will turn into one single sacrifice. He would be convinced that this is a great idea. However, Mr. Smith has already informed that the project received the approval of management and again he gives forgiveness when a fresh folder suddenly breaks into his face. A little more, and the door will literally break from the loops through a loud cry. It is impossible to hide the staff in front of the team. When Mr. Smith finally managed to break away from captivity, his condition was a true pity. Employees made every effort to support it at this difficult point. However, the strawberry milk purchased for Lucy has become a symbol of hope for a man. At least the girl stays with him. However, when she offered her a pink bottle, she politely refused that she was immediately visible from her face. The whole team was quietly whispering Mr. Smith's failure. The perfect goat of release was found. Undoubtedly, responsibility lies on her. It was she who stood near the press release, because someone should be guilty. Again, employees noticed their faces distorted, but this time he crossed the border. Charlie could withstand a lot, but the humiliation of her family was the last drop. Unable to withstand the tension, she resolutely answered Mr. Smith because his last argument was an obvious demonstration of force. Only a moment and he was picked up for a scrip like a puppy. Jerry returned not in time, at the moment when it was in vain. The manager forced him to apologize, although no doubt the cost of these words was less than a penny. Only then did Jeremy release the head of the department, almost throwing him on the floor. The promise to report on the incident in the disciplinary department was heard like a thunder in the clear sky. The result of the meeting, which took place in a few days, was the decrease in Mr. Smith in the post, a significant loss of part of his salary and numerous other losses. It was extremely difficult to see how a friendly Lucy to him began to approach the parking lot again. She complained that someone was spreading rumors about her close relationship with Mr. Smith, but it's just fictional. Who could say that? Parker claimed that the head of the department is probably going to be released soon. Finally, everyone will get rid of the need to spend time watching his disgusting face. It was at the moment when his fist struck him in his jaw. Mr. Smith stated loudly that Lucy was his girlfriend because she could not tolerate such actions. Despite her efforts to assure that she is not related to him, all offices have already made their conclusions. Humiliated, she immediately flew out of the room. On the other hand, if this contribution has not lived up to expectations, you can always pay attention to another manager. Jeremy soon reported that Mr. Smith had been temporarily removed from his duties, but the department coped with his tasks perfectly, even in his absence. The project was represented by Avishya, but its implementation was temporarily suspended. The Yanan project is again activated and put into operation. Derek was appointed head of the exit, who was previously headed by Mr. Smith. Surprisingly, Luce did not show any signs of emotional installment. What step will she choose? The changes have proven to be extremely pleasant, and now the department is enthusiastic. Lucy focused on Germa, decisively determining that winning a male heart is a simple thing. And she was completely ready for it. After the collection, Utah approached Charlie. Surprised by her own ability to predict that the project should be left intact, she explained her words, referring to the news from Oleg. In her past life, she mentioned that reducing the value of shares and investing in stabilizing the situation caused a great discontent of Parker. They sat in the Hue Cafe when a cheerful young man brought them a new, exclusive dessert. Utah tried to refuse tactfully because she was not liked to her. However, the unwavering smiling, he convinced her to taste at least a small piece. And it turned out that he was right. Oh yes, it was incredibly delicious. Yu was absolutely confident in his baking, but a approving assessment of a demanding, skeptical buyer was even more important to him. Leaving alone, Lucy tirelessly sought the unraveling of Charlie's motives. Why did she start communicating with Utah? On the other hand, it is only in favor. Look, here they are with Jeremy. This opportunity cannot appear every day. She immediately took advantage of the situation and invited the boss to drink coffee together. He said he prefers juice, and she replied that she always chooses it, because in her belief, juice is better than coffee. And here unexpectedly, the glass slipped out of Lucy's hands. She hurriedly started collecting debris, but the first touch left a footprint. A scratch appeared on her fingers. Spare. Mourning, she was quietly simple, acknowledging that she was suffering from unbearable pain. Despite all the expectations, Jeremy simply made the tips to use the patch and departed. In the end, he stressed that the puddle must be removed. Parker did not stay away. He immediately ran to the girl as if she suffered serious injuries. She appealed to her rescuer, asking her wound. Katila burns like a wave of heat, but it remains extremely sweet. If he watched Jeremy's contemptuous look, he would probably make an effort to hide his own pleasure. Charlie got to the eye on the eye. No matter how he sought to tell her everything, fear of hurting her forced her to remain silent. However, the conversation did not go in that direction, but touched the topic of KFECH. Utah swore to stay away from him, but seductive patties created a great temptation. As soon as possible, the sister immediately disappeared from the general look. Slightly nervous, Jeremy strongly stood on Charlie's way, blocking his way. Everything he dreamed of was to invite her for dinner, as well as to protect it from a spectacle. Parker, who was circling around Lucy, the expression of his face radiated much more emotions than a fictional reason for discussing Mr. Smith. He sincerely worried about her, feeling really deep, and here they are already enjoying the evening at a luxurious restaurant. Isn't it too lush space for a regular chat about an old woman? Instead, Jeremy again decided to ask Parker. However, he was again assured that things were in order. Finally, he had to promise that he would no longer raise this issue. When they left the restaurant, Charlie realized that her legs were terribly tired. She already imagined how the next hour would barely withstand such tension. This idea was absolutely correct, and the Heektuft immediately collapsed. Charlie lost her balance and collapsed, but Jerry had time to pick her up quickly. He found himself so puzzled that he could to grow up to her, asking if everything was fine. When Charlie finally rose, she sighed hard. She has recently repaired these shoes, and now they broke again. There were no options left. You had to carefully lift it in your hands. The girl did not expect such, and it turned out that the feeling would be incredibly pleasant. Finally, she was put on one of the sofas, which allowed her to breathe a little. After a while, Jeremiah returned, bringing a package and a first aid kit. He took a first aid kit from the staff and immediately prepared to give the girl first aid. Everything was ready. She was no longer worried about the shoes because he had already purchased new ones for her. German skillfully created for Charlie sophisticated packs and confidently emphasized that she deserves the best. At this point, the call of the phone went unnoticed. Parker sat in his car, shrouded in atmosphere far from romance. Inside him, a relentless hatred was boiling. He remarked that Jeremiah is too frequently near Charlie. He is seen perfectly with what he was interested in, Hugh. Yes, she became truly more attractive and even received the title of the most working and beautiful girl of the department. However, this did not give her the right to just leave him. Finally, she raised the call. Parker called to remind of tomorrow. Now his thoughts are relentlessly returning to her, although it all began as a frivolous joke. Then, without spending a minute, he challenged his comrades, claiming that he would inevitably fall in love with a brand new employee. He met her and immediately invited her phone number. After a joint dinner, it became obvious that Charlie was able to have incredibly interesting conversations. In addition, she was marked by incredible kindness. She took on all his duties even when he betrayed her in clubs and bars. But now everything has changed. Watching the rapid rise in stocks, he imagined how he could give them a bright future. They soon went to swim on a yacht rented exclusively for two of them. Charlie, like a graceful doll, stood with a huge bouquet, while bright salutes blossomed behind her back. On the legs of the girl shone shoes purchased by jerks. However, she gladly accepted a wedding offer from Parker. She enjoyed the moment, gently hugging him, and watching the news about the rapid fall of the shares in which this guy recently invested her capital. The next day, she was already sharing the news about the office directly in the office. Everyone smiled, but in fact, for various reasons, no one felt joy from the wedding. In particular, Lucy was amazed. She just couldn't believe this news. She trembled from rage and jealousy when her gaze stopped on a valuable ring, and Charlie's voice, who praised the sincerity and kindness of Parker, exacerbated her feelings. It was at least extremely painful. No, she still won't let Parker release. All Charlie's hopes will disappear without a trace, as if thrown into the trash. Finally, even a dope Parker heard the news of a sharp fall in the company's shares, in which he put everything he was capable of. This friend who managed to lie so brazenly forced him to invest in an unprofitable company. What if it continues and it will be without a single penny? However, this is not about what to say, Charlie. It is better to take it away from us. However, can she not notice the newspaper with the depressing news that was thrown away? As is usually the case, the whole team went to the restaurant, and the task of processing meat has taken over Utah. Lucy did not point out that, in her opinion, Utah would perfectly handle the waiter's work. It remains a mystery whether Lucy has succeeded at least. On the thread of enmity that stretched between them, beads could be stringed. The dispute stretched as if it was time to listen to its every sound, and he, together with Vem, considered a concept. As it turned out, according to her sister, once Charlie had already received an offer of hands and hearts, he had to hurry. Only looking at the girl did he think of one thing: whether he would be able to save her from this mistake. Finally, they gathered again in order. It was the most favorable moment to realize her plan. Of course, Parker felt joy while sitting, especially because he avoided warm embrace of Lucy this time. However, no matter what, Charlie finally let her in Toxie. The girl put her friend in the car, constantly praising Parker. At some point, she realized that she had forgotten her belongings in the restaurant and allowed her to stay with her close to her alone. Lucy hastily showed how much her cold is permeated and how acutely she seeks a warm boy. Her hints were so clear and obvious that there was simply no doubt. The kiss was inevitable. Their lips merged, and betrayal became inevitable. But Parker did not feel the desire to move away from her. It was exactly what he wanted. He found in Magic Lucy. Charlie stood, watching her boyfriend in this life and girlfriend gave her together. It happened again. She couldn't hold her tears, apparently, because, as they say, hope dies the last. However, this event really was to be aware of joy. Or maybe there is at least a reason to order pizza? These two complement each other perfectly. This is spoken by real melancholy. Charlie tirelessly poured a drink to her rumka, without thinking that the cat would once be able to stop it. However, the manager reappeared on time, instantly grabbing a bottle. She invited him to stay, and he instead offered her cooperation. He offered a really wonderful thing. Why not contact him every time she needs help or want to listen to her? Why not? In addition, at the same time, she had a great opportunity to lean on his wide back and enjoy an instant, easy intoxication. The morning Parker began with pain in his head and a slow realization that he was no longer alone in bed. But he is almost married. We cannot let them learn about it. This is what he said, Lucy. And instantly her eyes were filled with tears. She agreed to remain silent, but only if he began to meet her. Oh yes, it was an impeccable option, from which anyone who has common sense could not give up. It was not the most favorable moment for Charlie's call, but he could not afford to put a phone. His bride was in a beauty salon and preferred to create makeup that would remain in memory forever. Her mother-in-law, of course, had to be delighted at least this time. Then, in her past life, she constantly humiliated Charlie and repeatedly reminded that she was accepted into the family exclusively as an obedient maid for her son. She has already hurried to meet her parents while Lucis nervous her nails. Will he really leave her? No, she will choose it. In the end, on the eve of meeting with her parents, she spent the night with the boy Charlie. The family gathered at a table in the restaurant waiting for Charlie. When she came in, Parker's parents literally frozen as amazed, getting rid of the gift of language. It was funny to see the parents emphasizing the modesty of Charlie, which Parker spoke of at the same time inadvertently hinting at her frank attire. At that moment, she remembered how in her past life she always felt guilty about that woman. It did not prevent Charlie to tell how carefully she cares about the health of her future husband. And how will they be able to visit on weekdays when she gets married and leave her job? What shock did his mother-in-law get? Finally, Parker's father expressed the word. She must marry, have a son, and keep her views with her. Charlie could no longer tolerate it. Her body is her business, and there is nothing wrong if she decides to give birth to a girl. Finally, what matters that her father is accused of being born a girl? The girl disdainfully called her mother-in-law, not hiding her directness by jewelry. She has already stopped trying to please others. This should be completed in the previous life because it was time to move on. And so, the wedding will not happen. Parker felt his heart down to heels. Could it be a sign? The mother-in-law looked as if she were fainting, but her son was completely passionate about the bride who had to leave soon. But she is indifferent. Let them understand on their own. She will do her best to keep past mistakes again happen again. Leaving Charlie's restaurant, she noticed Lucy that she came out of the talks. What? Its appearance here? Just in time and just to the case? Now his mother quarreled him, insisting that he would accept her choice, but she was not ready to compromise. Lucy was in the midst of the dispute. She really did not hear any scandal. Family disputes cannot be in the spotlight. The girl with a smile accepted the invitation to sit at the table, although it was clearly visible on Parker's face that he did not like it. However, this was the cause of its appearance. Charlie looked closely at her phone screen, where one by one a message from the alarming bridegroom appeared one by one, and everything was ready. These two finally met. She could leave behind a fallen place of work, saying goodbye to her past life. However, let the notifications of her past remain delayed for a minute until Janan and Utah invite her to enjoy a cup of coffee. How can you refuse when the manager even transfers her for payment? He not only conveys it, but also kindly offers something delicious for a snack. Parker woke up next to Lucy. For an unknown reason, she was convinced that they were now together. But what was her confidence based on? They are not a couple. He still intends to marry Charlie, while Lucy will only remain his mistress. This Peel approached the exit, not at all realizing how painful the destruction of long-made plans can be. This morning, Parley learned that Lucy asked Tom's phone number. One of those guys who tried to attract the girl's attention at a meeting of graduates. It seems time to recall the Treaty of Jeremiah. The manager felt an incredible joy that he was approached, and without a doubt was ready to assist, making every effort. And she finally decided to seek help. Charlie returned home after work. The lanterns were shimming, but their light could not create a sense of security. It was in this terrible darkness that she heard his voice. It was a volume, and in her miracle, he turned out to be quite friendly. At this point, they were not alone. In a parked car, Parker sat in a parked car, squeezing the steering wheel with a terrible rage. He could not believe his eyes. She ignores every call and despises his desire to meet, and with some strange guy, she is so easy to spend time. Lucy knocked on the window. She sat in the car and consistently disrupted the rose petals, which Parker planned to give Charlie. It was extremely unpleasant to listen to her girl again and again with her former classmate, as if it were a matter of studio life with Hugh. The girlfriend insisted. Charlie's mother always avoided serious obligations by finding a lover, and her daughter was a precise reflection. For Parker, this news was not only unexpected, but also incredibly unpleasant. He was constantly afraid that he could have the same thing. It was a great opportunity for Lucy to invite him to collect suitcases and go for adventures, forgetting the traitor. At that point, Charlie stated that she did not invite him, and that she was not guilty that he was here. The former classmate did not trust her words and no doubt did not intend to go. She decided to diminish him, mocking him, looking at him from above. No, Tom was not going to go so simple. If she refuses to voluntarily move with him, he will certainly tell you how to make the right choice. However, Charlie was under a reliable protection. He barely rushed to take her away, as he was immediately deprived of 3 deaths. It was incomprehensible. It was Jeremy. In addition, he introduced himself as Charlie's guy. To call this guy a freak and insist that he hit his hands is a huge mistake. He pushed his hand. What is the difference that he then fell to the ground and began to moan with pain, almost dislodging his shoulder? Jeremy was indifferent to everything. He drove Charlie somewhere far away, leaving all the new tension behind. She made gratitude for fruitful cooperation until she realized that they had already arrived at the hotel. The journalist did not even deny that it left everyone in full embarrassment of how to perceive it. However, the explanation appeared instantly. He knows where she lives. In addition, the guy cannot but show his care, at least taking the girl at least to the hotel. Charlie was much surprised, although it was unclear which of them was really affected. She noted that leaving the girl alone in the hotel looked strange. However, her words were perceived as a rather inappropriate hint, although she did not mean it. In the end, they decided to settle together, although at first it seemed extremely inconvenient. She also noted that they had enough one room instead of two. He was a little discord. How perfectly she flicked with words and how pleasant it seemed to think about a living together in the same room. Finally, their rooms were located nearby, so the separation took place in a peaceful and calm atmosphere. In the soul of Charlie was dominated by real chaos. She felt that she was extremely stupid, and it was unclear how everything could have happened today. Jeremy has not tormented himself. He has already resolved all the issues related to the girl's safety. People from his team eliminated Tom and received information about Parker. So Jeremy was convinced that at that moment he was Alice. He realized that she was planning that meeting, writing a classmate about the desire to meet, and realized that this is why Charlie asked him to pretend that he was her boyfriend. Only the memory of a girl covered his thoughts as an awareness, like a lightning. His heart was heard. He did not even take away her dinner. When Jeremy came to her number, she met him in a bathrobe, wrapped in a towel on her head, just got out of her shower. This spectacle was incredibly charming and emitting home comfort. That is why the director, oppressed by little shyness, gently asked, "What would you like to taste?" Only Charlie confessed that she loved pig soup infinitely, as a small butterfly suddenly appeared on her towel. You could think that she was so afraid that Jeremy would have to save her from a little butterfly. Despite all the attempts to cope with this horrific danger, she slipped on a damp-filled landfill where the water was accumulating in puddles. The only one that could be grabbed was Jeremy's tie, which, incidentally, was nearby. Now both are on the floor. A scene which causes incredible embarrassment, but at the same time it is surprisingly attracted to its pleasure. Absolute silence reigned in the room. They clearly felt the strokes of their hearts, and the twilight which divided them seemed almost obeyed. Now nothing happened. Charlie was in bed, bewildered, and could not understand why her heart was beating so crazy. There was also Jeremy in the next room, but he understood why this event was so exciting. Separated by a thin hotel wall alone, they understood each other this night like no other. Throughout the night, Charlie could not cover her eyes, so the next morning she felt extremely sleepy. Jeremiah, of course, too. These were two cute zombies that did not sleep properly, and each of them was convinced that his neighbor had a great rest. He invited her for breakfast. In the morning, he showed concern, insisting that the guy can never leave the girl hungry. The director laughed, but most of all, he liked to see how the girl was embarrassed. The blow into the stomach was instantly and unexpectedly. Charlie noted that when he smiles, he resembles a dog. The girls had to explain instantly. It was about a large, intelligent, and obedient puppy of Labrador, smart and charming. Again, she made a clumsy nonsense, and he did not pay any attention. However, he quickly stopped the inconvenience, offering the topic of moving. Subsequently, it turned out that Utah had already found a wonderful apartment for Charlie. Soon they went to inspect the apartment. The girlfriend proudly remembered how she once lived in this room and praised all his advantages tirelessly. Charlie was gratefully grateful for the assistance, and the stuffing was aware that she needed to leave the room as soon as possible. It turned out that the landlord is a wonderful person, and utilities are not burdensome at all. In addition, housing has a southern orientation that guarantees a sea of solar heat. They went to contract on the road, persistently agreeing that it is better to remain silent about the move even in the office. During the conversation, it turned out that Charlie and Jeremy studied at one university, although the girls seemed to have never crossed their roads. On the same evening, Parker tired tirelessly to penetrate the apartment where his bride once lived. However, the intercom came to life, and the guy began to shout loudly, insisting that he open the door of the one whom he recognized as his lover. If only the doors did not open, it would be better. After all, there was Amber, twice as wider than Parker. The desire to quarrel with Tudge disappeared, and the guy bowed in the bow, sincerely apologizing for his intervention, only trying to find out where the girl once disappeared. The door closed sharply, dividing Parker not only from the truth, but also from his broken nose. Soon it became obvious that Charlie fled without warning it. And of course, he began to call her persistently with the words that forgive her indifference to her mother, betrayal, and even everything else. Only it would prompt her to talk to him. How did she decide to move in time? The frustration instantly dispelled the unexpected call at the door. And it was that strap that brought her soup. On his feet, a cat was rubbed, which at first glance seemed to be, well, groomed and homemade. Jeremy immediately lost its significance. All the attention was drawn without delay. Who were his own pets? He quickly managed to turn him to his side, and later it turned out that Jeremy lives in a nearby apartment. He felt ashamed for not warning in advance and worried that the girl could be angry. She seemed incredibly surprised. He hoped that everything would end there, but unfortunately, everything went completely different. The cheerful complex shuddered, releasing a powerful, indignant vapor. Utah once lived here, which is why he settled side by side, to help, maintain, and with little control to follow everything. The question was resolved, and the attention again returned to the food he brought with him. The most farewell, as well as sincere greetings, fell to the lady's fate again. However, the farewell never came. At first, Jeremy suggested temporarily taking care of the cat, and soon the circumstances decided that he was also invited to visit for a while. And so they sat together, enjoying a mutual presence. But only the cat was suffering from energetic ironing and a powerful aroma of soup. It was not just a shipping food, but a real delicacy, served in a dish, which was bought in a restaurant with a unique aroma and, of course, a high price. Charlie was surprised and moved by this gesture, although hunger did not allow her to enjoy the emotions in full. In addition, the taste of the soup kept the same note that was so close to her memory. He seemed to be prepared by his father in the same morning, looking forward to returning from school. In fact, Jeremy only made his innocent sister to go for this dish to the hometown of that girl. It was incredibly nice to receive an invitation to visit the director's home at any time to play with the lady. If the guy did not break out of happiness and admiration, it was solely because he sought to avoid seizure in front of the girl. Returning to the apartment, Jeremy Carmill praised his cat. He was extremely happy because of the opportunity to invite a Charlick, and sincerely thanked the cat for having left the house in time. The next day, it was time to take the business again. So the Janik from Charlie went to a shop where the products of a new project for sale were presented. However, it is strange. The shelves were completely empty. I barely approached the employee to find out what happened to get in touch with the management instantly. It is really strange, but he absolutely did not want to see them in the trading room. The one who did not expect the approach of troubles was Lucy. However, Charlie and Yanni sharply burst into the office, radiating burning anger and determination to deal with the pig. It turned out that in the office, no one knew about the incident, which causes a man with allergies to peanuts in hospital. In addition, it turned out that Lucy did not even apologize to the store for the scandal. The noise came out to Jeremy, who also had no idea what was happening. The girl was completely embarrassed, trying to understand what actions she should take off guilt. The best way out was, no doubt, to cry and play the role of an innocent person who is silent about the problem only in order not to substitute Charlie. She claimed that she was not informed about the presence of allergens in products. So, the responsibility for the situation lay on Charlie. Soon the impression was that everyone is ready to come to the aid of those who are giving away with tears. Lucy suddenly jumped forward, again ready to take on all responsibility, right? And Charlie herself insisted that she didn't remember anything, although she is very sorry. But why not turn to cameras that keep everything without mistakes? Lucy did not expect it at all. Now she remains confused and does not know what to do with it. And there was no doubt that the records were stored. Charlie kept a flash drive that stored all the necessary information. And here there are footage on which Lucy receives instructions, ignoring them completely. This is where the state of peanuts and the sample sounds, and then the scandal is filming. The guilt was undoubtedly proven. In addition, along with Lucy Tanuli Parker, who also had to report on events. You know, there is an option that is guaranteed not to lose. To cry and translate all the blame to someone else. Parker was incredibly angry. Such an insidious trap did not expect him at all. He had to apologize, explaining that his goal was solely in explaining the situation, not the provocation of the MIH, because Lucy was completely new. The events on the roof continue. What else could I do? How wrong? She so needs a permanent position. and she will certainly find herself in the room with a friend. However, since Parker worked for the company longer, he noted that in such a situation, even the continuation of the contract, not to mention a permanent position, is unlikely. Lucy realized that she was involved in a situation where they did not even think about raising his position. This was the reason to make a short call to the same victim on behalf of the company with a promise to hand over a gift. And so the next blow is a call from an angry man. Who could come up with a whole salad package with Sarahis? However, it is not important for Lucy. Let him come to the company's head office and find Miss Yannon himself. The project manager, Utah, together with Charlie, just visited the office, actively discussing the upcoming day and work challenges. However, even the turnstiles could not provide a quiet passage. Only on the threshold was a sharp cry, which was instantly concerned about all employees. The same man who had recently been recessed peanut broke into the room. He sharply threw a box on the floor, from which the containers were scattered with the same salad that he once sent him to the hospital. Yanen urgently intervened in the situation, trying to get around with a dissatisfied client. Hearing her name, the man covered even more anger, because this is how Lucy introduced herself on the phone. In addition, the sender column on the box listed her person. Charlie instantly realized that the responsibility lies on Lucy, and it made her understand that the girl did not intend to stay in the company. The attempt to resolve the conflict did not produce the desired result. The man instantly moved to raise her hand, believing that she does not even plan to apologize. He did not suspect that there was Charlie nearby, in the memory of which there was an episode that heralded her death. The girl finally decided not to remain silent or stand apart. Her girlfriend Janen is not going to allow some dissatisfied client to strike. It happened at the right moment. It was necessary to explain that the parcel was sent not by me, but by another girl, and to promise that as soon as they were found, they will immediately be taken to the hospital, after which she would be on her knees. It was also necessary to provide compensation. It seemed that the man began to slowly calm down, though the altercation had not subsided. At this point, he decided to intervene with jerks. He was also aware of who caused everything, but invited a dissatisfied client to discuss the situation in a calmer and private environment. Charlie decided that, even if Lucy no longer plans to appear at work, she would make her respond to her own actions. This development of events was carefully observed by a man in a sophisticated outfit. He felt some dissatisfaction because Jeremy decided to interfere with the conflict, because the staff had almost already arranged the situation. So he understood the head of the company. On that day, Lucy spent time in the beauty salon, enjoying a peaceful silence until an unexpected message appeared on her phone. This was written by a mother, the woman who always expressed dissatisfaction and poured her anger on her. But whatever she wrote, Lucy will always live as a real queen. Immediately after the message, he rang the phone. It was Hugh, who was strangely interested in Charlie and her boyfriend. They agreed to meet in a cozy, small coffee shop. Lucy could not refuse to discuss her girlfriend behind her back. However, when she entered the cafe, she faced it all what she was counting on. At the table sat Charlie herself, who clearly had something to tell. She immediately spilled alcohol into Rumki, explaining that he had to resort to Hugh because Samolyans never appeared in the office. The girl immediately began to justify, saying that because of difficult circumstances, she is extremely difficult here. She confessed that her only girlfriend is Charlie, who, however, is constantly surrounded by others and does not pay her proper attention at all. However, her only girlfriend was not at all in waste of time for nonsense. She stretched Lucy an envelope with a report of Mabuvalin through walking and unauthorized exits from work. Although the girl felt that she was not so warm at work, she could not believe that the events were turning in this way. She expected that she would simply not continue the contract, but would not face such stunning release. She immediately began to refute the accusations of sending an insulting parcel to the client. Did her name indicate on the box? However, Charles had their interests. She explained that she was in a hurry because she was worried about her. After all, it was from her number that the calls came to the same victim. Further resistance was hopeless. I had to make a hurry to think of a new lie. To claim that she really sent a message at the link under the name of Miss Yannon, but there was definitely no peanut. Obviously, something was confused in the mail. Charlie persistently stated that she would be most appropriate to apologize to the client, and a few minutes later, she had already ordered Lucy to kneel before the hospital. With all the severity, the girl, after all, agreed. However, at the very moment, she did not stand again and began to assert that she was not the first, and the man would also not hurt to apologize. Jeremy's Parkers arrived in the place, but none of them even cast a look at Lucy, and even less hurried to help her. What else did I do? Only again plunge into tears and admit that she is pregnant. The words of the Hart Parishman were literally shocked by the panica. What? She is really pregnant? And it can't be that because of him? Plusa worried him only as the last. That evening, he called not her, but Charlie. Surprisingly, the girl lifted the tube and said quite calmly to talk because she had free time. Although she agreed only to convey a message, she indifferent whether the child is, as well as the truth that Lucy says. In the future, she does not intend to discuss with them nothing but a working question. Vi Parker decided not to disclose the fact of betrayal, as such rumors can harm her. Everything was tantamount. Neither the modern groom did not betray, and the rumors of the former remained absolutely unimportant for her. She dropped the tube and realized that even in such a situation, this podon is worried solely in her reputation. Parker really trembled. With every call of Lucy, he lit one cigarette after another, clearly without holding back nervous excitement. As if he were going to shout all his rage, his peace was immediately interrupted by his mom. She grabbed the girl's tube and announced that they were already actively preparing for the wedding. Gathering with the spirit, she suggested Lucy to live with the Parker, because she is already expecting a baby. She was extremely satisfied. She was walking in the shops next to her future mother. In-law, remembering Charlie confidently that it was all true, and the baby's father was her former groom. At that moment, she pretended to be extremely regretted, and insisted that no matter what, they should remain the best girlfriends. Charlie could not say a word because she did not understand how everything happened so unexpectedly. So she went away to make the news obtained alone. Instead of pathetic crying during her farewell, Lucy suddenly broke the silence with laughter. Ah, how pity this successful beauty looks, who is barely able to make even a couple of words. She has absolutely nothing left. It is so small and powerless, abandoned throughout the world. Now only Lucy is left. And here, justice finally won. At home next to her mother-in-law was really comfortable. She was fed with care and always encouraged to taste more. On the table, tirelessly served new plates with delicious dishes. For the first time in her life, she tasted an incredibly delicious homemade soup and extremely juicy meat. But here's a new culinary miracle. Carp juice. He was horribly ignorant and reflective, and no doubt did not cause any approving response. But the mother-in-law insisted, "It is necessary to drink. Then the baby would grow up healthier." I had to squeeze the nose and drink, making every effort to avoid burning. Otherwise, you would have to swallow again. It was not enough for this unpleasant experience. Another trouble appeared. The courier delivered a box of wedding invitations. However, the choice of invitations was instructed by mother-in-law. I refused to compromise, and Lucy, they looked just terribly ugly. Why is it mixed in their affairs? Who ordered her to act like that? It is Parker's wedding, not his mother. In addition, it turned out that the mother-in-law also purchased their Anbog for Lucy. What a caring mother-in-law. She cares for the newlyweds to have unnecessary worries. Indeed, the attempt to deny was severely interrupted. Our precious son is so killed at work all day. What other joy should he run shopping even on a weekend? If the bride will behave, the wedding will not happen. Parker came in the evening. The meeting with the future bride did not cause him any passion. However, the money was lit in Lucy a real enthusiasm. His father handed him a wedding gift, a card with a solid amount intended for payment of housing. If she was aware that the money spent on the stocks was barely proceeding with his father, it is extremely unlikely that she would be so insanely rushing to him. That evening, Parlia returned home and gave it suddenly to the Jerry, who, as it turned out, took the cat to the hospital. Fortunately, everything is fine with her. It was only a planned review. Charlie asked to hug the cat for goodbye, but instead received a password from Jerem's apartment and permission to go there every time she had a desire to talk to the ladies. In addition, the director suggested that tonight take a kitten to himself tonight. After all, she is also gently committed to Charlie. Why not take the opportunity? Lying in bed, the girl remembered how in her past life she had the same small and charming cat that, unfortunately, someone took away. She received a message from Lucy. In the memories, a picture of the past life broke out when they gave out wedding invitations. Charlie, concerned with excitement, opinal, and so the distribution had to be put on Parker. Today she agreed to come and even promised to book a table in a restaurant. Fiancé? Great, because her fate will avoid a hard life with a Parker, which is the most important thing. What are these fun promises? To eat everything that will appear on the table. After all, a child will also appear with her. Lucy does not know yet, but in fact, Parker cannot have children, so the next day they met. The poor bride was not even allowed to put on her favorite skirt. She was dressed in a strange, unattractive dress of unusual colors. Everything could do if Charlie did not notice it. But unexpectedly, the entire atmosphere of the office appeared before Luzea. However, none of the audience showed joy from its appearance, and in return expressed a clear surprise by her unexpected arrival. Utah even jumped out of place to be indignantly asked, "What are you doing here at all?" However, Charlie appeared, and with extraordinary courtesy announced that the girl has a wonderful news, which made all we gathered here. Poor Lucy was forced to take the edge of the table, with each cell of the body feeling the cold, unfriendly atmosphere around. Parker even suggested that she did not sew, but quickly slipped through the dressing. But she could not and did not want to do so. Instead, she decided to contact the bank and notify all employees. In the end, she marries. All present were shocked. Did she decide to marry Smith Chief? No. She smiled as if she were doing all and stated that she was Parker. The news impressed everyone like a lightning with an emerald flash. She not only came without an invitation, but also stated with irresistible joy that she was going to marry a man who had just thrown an unhappy Charlie. Only Charlie herself remained calm and sincerely welcomed the newlyweds, because it was exactly what she always wanted to achieve. Lucy took the insincere greetings, which were pronounced through his clenched teeth, as if she had not noticed any falsehood. Even before the evil Parker introduced her, she presented Charlie's invitation and confidently stated that she was caught by the bride's bouquet. Lucy was amazed and disappointed. What is a calm face? Why does it not see any hint of dissatisfaction? The only one who was not delayed to express his dissatisfaction was Parker. At the wheel of the car, he, like a thunder, crashed on a girl and her actions. She had to assure him that she did not plan to unfold the events. Her intention was only to convey Charlie's invitation and nothing more. However, the excuse did not justify its appointment. Parker was angrily charged even more. How could she do so with that girl, without which his life seemed incomplete? He was angry and frustrated. No, he could not allow someone to turn to Charlie. Lucy felt that everything was out of plan. She so tried to escape from the ghost of her mother, who shouted that she was stupid and in vain. And here, everything is wrong again. I had to apologize. No, she was barely able to break out of the house, and she would never decide again. Charlie also went home because the main purpose of her arrival has already been achieved. She barely left the office, as the staff quickly explained to the new employee why, with the advent of Lucy in the room, such a tense, deafening silence was established. Charlie quietly left the room and soon came up with jerks. How could you stay when you had to take the girl home? He guessed perfectly, giving up drinking. He noted that it seems that now he would have to take the lady with him. You need to somehow support the girl. In addition, her cat loves her infinitely. Why not try? Charlie decided, once he is so sweet, why not ask him? How last time? The wedding day soon came. It all started with the fact that Mother, in law, strictly forbidden painting Lucy too bright, because it can be harmful to the baby. The aesthetics of the photos for her was secondary. Everything that really worried the heart were descendants and preservation of the genus. Lucy was not liked. She did not suffer a disgusting dress with a senseless cut, indifferent invitation, and pale makeup. But she could not influence these circumstances. Even the girlfriends did not come to their spirit. Parker said to her friend, emphasizing that she did not have real girlfriends and who would come to the rescue. Receiving guests was rather a duty than a pleasure, but there was no real shock. Until Charlie appeared on the threshold. She was incredibly charming. It seemed that the air around her flickered, and a solid, handsome germer had a solid, handsome man, which only exacerbated the overall impression. The director stated that he had come on behalf of the entire management. Meanwhile, friends rushed to the park, asking who this wonderful girl standing next to him. One of them immediately rushed to her, seeking to get acquainted, not paying attention to the dissatisfaction which was visible on the face of Jeremiah. As soon as he heard her name, he immediately realized, this is exactly the girl whom Parker called Derivan Region. He complained that she was imposing something with him, and the chief opposed these unlovable botany. However, all this was a frank lie. At that moment, Parker undoubtedly realized that he had lost. Charlie visited Lucy, but found her lonely in the room, concentratedly staring at the cold floor. It seemed that sadness and loneliness were completely absorbed. She was a brilliant sot to keep his joyful appearance, although inside it was dissatisfied. Why does she so carefully demonstrate fun? After all, she is only a guest. Charlie was fond of her charm, but felt that she had once been forced to wear that unattractive dress chosen by her mother-in-law. Then Lucy was one who caught the bouquet. But what she felt remains a mystery. On the threshold of Charlie's hall met Ohui, and Chada confidently invited him to come to support. Although it seemed that there was no need, Jeremy was circling next to the girl, as if a formidable dog. It turned out that the company of girlfriends would also come to the wedding. All but Charlie, they chose a symbolic gift, giving only a minimum amount to be able to get on the holiday. It will not come by accident. Undoubtedly, Yura told who the bride is this wedding and how he betrayed a common girlfriend. Charlie felt that they were thinking about something, and immediately the opportunity to understand what exactly was about. Suddenly, girls glowing with glasses appeared, fascinated with bold cutouts and showed open legs. The girls who radiated a bright club charm and were marked with courage, together with the company, literally broke into the room. Despite the fact that the clothes looked too bright for the official event, they did not hold back their admiration for Charlie's appearance and ordered her not to pay attention to them, but to just enjoy delicious food. The ceremony began. Former loved ones who once filled her life with warmth have now become far away. She moved away from them as much as she could and almost stopped living. Lucy enjoyed the atmosphere of the wedding, and Parker patiently took it. Both got what they deserved. When the time came to shoot, a group of girlfriends hurriedly intervened in the frame, stating that they were extremely close. Real friends to the grave. It is worth noting that in Korean, this statement takes on a rough shade, literally means friend's ovary, which is absolutely inappropriate in such a situation. The photographer even surprised, thinking that his words did not join, but the girls repeated everything. Parker was angry. It is clear that the brilliant had to be invited, but why invite these checks? However, catching the bouquet turned out to be incredibly beautiful and graceful, because the task of Lorali was not to embarrass Lucy, but to enjoy the sight of their flight. Not only did the atmosphere in advance organized in advance, the Parker looked at his former. It was incredibly painful, especially since just half an hour ago, the cheetah said words that did not forget the wounds. Then she leaned to the girl and quietly said that it was probably time to collect garbage, thrown by that girlfriend. No, she is wrong. Only now will Parker kiss her, and everything will fall into place. She is the main character of this story and certainly feels true happiness. She did not just pick him up. She won, taking him away as her victory. After graduating from the ceremony, she and her girlfriends enjoyed great snacks. They praised Hambalus loudly, convinced that it was her mother-in-law who gave her such sophisticated beauty. Parker's mother, to put it mildly, was not in a better humor, so she immediately turned to the waiter, insisting that he expels unwanted visitors. They were not going to throw a party. On the contrary, gave money for a wedding. After all, they are the same guests as everyone else, so there is no reason to expel them. They announced the whole hall that Lucy took the boy from her girlfriend and then forced her to catch a bouquet. They were already expelled, but a man suggested using his card to pay the table, so that, according to him, Charlie's girlfriends stopped worrying others. The waiter had no chance of standing against this secured and a physically strong man. The girls were amazed and even embarrassed by the delight of this act. After the banquet, the cheat even invited him to spend time together for a glass. Saying goodbye, a group of friends sincerely wished Charlie and Jeremy a wonderful date, which promised to become a real hit from a hard man. However, she still invited him to dinner because she never tasted a single dish on the banquet. However, she awarded big money for her wedding. It would be great if Lucy spent them in cancer in the future, a disease that seemed to be waiting for her for Charlie. Although, most likely, Parker will use them to invest in stocks. The spectacular car slid the streets cleverly, and any stranger could assume that a happy family cheated was sitting behind the wheel. However, despite external harmony, the newly minted couples have repeatedly argued. Parker persistently accused Lucy of the noisy pranks of her girlfriends, and she constantly searched for justification. At some point, they equalized with a luxurious SUV. According to the bridegroom, even if he sold his girlfriend, the money for such a car would still not be enough. The cars were nearby. A gorgeous black Jeep and a sophisticated white car, decorated with delicate pink bows. It could only be limited to simple envy if it were not possible that it was the car Jeremy on which he went with Charlie. Lucius was incredibly unpleasant to listen to. The park sharply noticed the leader who removed other women. No, She just couldn't get together to spend so much effort on cleaning the garbage left by a girlfriend. There were no problems or moral doubts in the atmosphere. She was satisfied that she spent very little money and ate hearty. In addition, she was waiting for a pleasant meeting and met on the way. Charlie rejected him again, and it was clearly visible. When the girl noticed his pallor, she had to explain that he really looks great. The young man, no doubt, focused on this, which caused a slight feeling of inconvenience in Utah. It was a cute remark that raised his mood. Going to the Toxes, Ut was convinced that he was a wonderful person. Although Charlie never appeared on the banquet, she still sat with Jerry at the table. She offered him her help because he always shows inexhaustible generosity and never leaves her in trouble. He gladly came to her aid even at the third morning without demanding anything in return. In addition, she should weigh carefully before giving her support to someone because it is impossible to exclude that someone will want to use it for their own needs. It rains on the street. The Jurleys could not convince the girl, so as if under the influence of rain, he immediately rushed to look for an umbrella in the next 24-hour store. Charlie believed that he was tall, attractive, and had good remedies. But what is fascinating in it? For what purpose does she appear in his life? This is really the perfect moment to ask a question. He will have to answer because now it is not only a personal conversation, but the answer will happen under this umbrella. But he promised to tell later about the moment when the girl fascinated him. Now they walked side by side, and he kept the umbrella so that his shoulder barely touched the lower part. After getting to the house, they decided to taste a glass of drink together. How sincerely Jeremy felt joy when she allowed her to enter her home. Opening the refrigerator, the girl reached out for a beer jar, and he, trying to do the same, was surprised too close. It came from an incredibly pleasant aroma, and its beauty was fascinated. He caused her feelings that it was impossible to ignore them. Jeremy realized that it was time to take the initiative. After all, in such midst, the question of beer becomes completely irrelevant. Finally, they allowed themselves to give up a kiss. In fact, her sympathy for Jiria was born very, very long ago. They really study in one university, although they have not yet found a common language. One day, he paid attention to a girl who was engaged in some business, through which Sakura shed unusual light. She looked gentle and restrained. Her wonderful face seemed to be mysteriously hiding under a graceful mask. But what did she do? The girl looked with delight in a small kitten that lay peacefully among the juicy grass. It was abandoned by her mother, just like her. The girl rose to buy cat feed and asked Jeremy to stay and care for the kitten. But why go at all? He had a sausage which he could not hesitate to offer a cat, and he just didn't want to stand. The baby began to eat, and she was gently cutting him up. The girl noted that if she had the same unique beauty as this kitten, her mother would undoubtedly return to her. She then settled the sausage for Jeremy and just said goodbye, raising her way. The kitten was quickly navigated, but ordered to wait for a mother cat or follow a girl who struck him with her extraordinary beauty. Undoubtedly, this girl was Charlie, the same one that she was quietly lying in his bed, warmed by the presence of a cat. She is one that was once caressed in the university's student building. The girl woke up in a light shock, but the clothes remained relentlessly on her, as if nothing had happened. She could not mention anything, but Jeremy mentioned every detail with stunning accuracy. Yesterday, they were visited by the man who saved the company with girlfriends, bringing with him a drink. As it turned out, he worked on Jeremy. Together, they took places at the table, and a real fun evening began. Drunk, Charlie decided that it is unacceptable to leave unfinished. In other words, she immediately began to attach to Jeremy directly in the eyes of his employee. It was incredibly ashamed to mention. I wanted to bite into the ground and never to meet the views of others again. However, no one could cancel the work. I had to climb and gather, though Jeremy assured that you could afford a little to relax. The honeymoon of Lucy and Parker turned a number of disappointments. While she dreamed of joint walks and cozy moments together, he stubbornly refused to meet the eyes of her fresh bride, like to sit behind the monitor. The girl was very angry. She even threatened to reveal the world that savings on the apartment were invested in the stocks. But this did not produce the expected result. Stone Parker only to raise his voice a little, as Lucy immediately grabbed his stomach, stating that because of his sharp stress, she became ill immediately. Everything turned out to be useless. Parker was indifferent to the situation, and the girl quietly, with a shade of pity in her voice, said, "If you went on a journey with Charlie, it would be quite different." She collapsed her anger on the director. In addition, she constantly complained that Parker has been heading for 1,000 years, that he is a real failure and would certainly give any intelligent person. The guy was only sad to say that nothing like this had never happened. Here, Lucy pretended to be revealing the horrible truth. In fact, Charlie asked her to distract Parker's attention to herself, and she agreed because she was undoubtedly in love with him. However, he looked exclusively at her. Then Charlie asked her friend to get pregnant from that guy to force him to switch his attention to her. Parker is boiling with anger, but she was crying constantly, assuring that she loved him passionately and believed that Charlie would later tell herself. He sharply grabbed her by her shoulders, and she, through abundant tears, confessed that she acted exclusively at the orders of Charlie, not of her own will. Finally, the girl frankly confessed that she had lost her baby. It seems to have happened in the hospital when she was forced to apologize on her knees. This news, obviously, did not inspire them at all. How can it be? At first, the marriage was solemnly registered, the repair was successfully carried out, and now, a miscarriage? How could she all this time lead to him so much? To claim that the abdomen hurts, though there was no baby there. In fact, they could part with him. There is no divorce in the Parker family. However, after all, they will have a new child because true love always unites them. Did Charlie really seize her will? In such a situation, Parker could only enjoy lush loneliness behind a glass. He himself, because of his former, proved to be completely foolish, marrying this nonsense. However, nothing like this was conceived. It all started when Charlie, who communicated with him and Lucy, bought Jeremy coffee. This restless fool began to give out a hero, as if he should guard her. But who should he actually protect? From your own boyfriend? No, he will not allow them to just enjoy each other. What about a business card? Forget about her. Still incendiary dancing. She manipulated Lucy and her interests, and he uses Jeremy to finally destroy her. At work, no one had their honeymoon, but Charlie, together with his girlfriends, hurried to read the list, were those who were given the increase. Together, they discussed the wonderful aroma of the conditioner for the linen used by Miss Yanin. The conversation with enthusiasm was joined by Derek, who constantly wanted to know more about this smell, but never dared to approach. Charlie seemed that the girl was very attractive. Together, they would create the perfect couple. Patuta hurries because the list does not read on its own. It turned out that Ianina was appointed a leader, and Durako, his assistant. Sit, earn. Charlie and Utah rewrote, discussing today's corporate party. Jeremy is absent. He took the hospital, and the score will be informed later. But where is he? The chief, as a rule, rarely takes on the score of hum. Probably something serious happened. Besides, how not he is upset because of a missed corporate holiday. Yanin's parents decided to celebrate the event in their own restaurant. These extremely friendly people treated their daughter with great tenderness. In her own restaurant, she was helped by a man who finally had to do something. Charlie was forced to leave. She was again written by a restless Parker who threatened to bury her if she did not part with Jeremy. Soon a man was passed by a man, and a girl with blonde hair was walking nearby. Apparently, there was a smoker nearby. Returning home, Charlie stared at the door of Jeremy's apartment. Throughout the day, neither she nor knew and received any news from him. She has repeatedly tried to contact him, tirelessly pressing the button on the intercom. However, he was silent, and behind the door heard a ringing, loud path. Then Charlie remembered that she knew the password for Jeremy's apartment and decided that now it is time to take advantage of it. Finally, it became clear why the director did not answer calls and messages. He was lying in bed, and his burning red face opened a high heat. Charlie couldn't just leave him, so she carefully wiped his face with a cold towel, hoping at least to ease his condition a little. Jeremy woke up and sat down. He asked about the corporate day and the working day, trying to give the impression that everything was fine with him. However, it was an open lie, even if at that moment he seemed incredibly sweet. He warmed up that Charlie came to take care of him, which made the director incredibly happy. She is so stunning. This is what the girl did not expect at this moment. Unexpected compliments that made her even more embarrassed than could be assumed. So what do you plan to do with it? It can be very persistent, but at the same time incredibly sweet. Is everything okay with him right now? Of course he is nearby. What else does you need to feel better? Despite his illness, she could not resist the kiss. Last time it was intoxicated, but this time the action was the result of her conscious choice. Pleasant moments turned into thinking about how to behave now. What are their relationships? No, you should not delve into it. It's full of nonsense. In addition, it is time to gather. The director has already appeared nearby. He behaved as if nothing had happened, and then suddenly stated that he had already given a mistake yesterday. What? About the mistake? Well, if she kisses? Yes, she considers it a mistake. Just forget about it and move on. However, it was not about guessing. A real mistake was that he did not spend it. He will never be able to erase her image from her memory. The memory of her will remain with him forever. Yesterday, they approached each other, and the nature of their relationship changed significantly. No one has held hands so gently, Charlie, and did not approach the Jurlov with such sophisticated neatness. Parker was the person who did not know fear. He almost started a real scandal by seeking information about the director. A considerable amount of money has already been paid, and no one intends to delve into this issue. It turned out that the reason for the refusal was absolutely clear. Jeremy, the grandson of the head of the company in which they worked, one of the largest companies of Korea. So now it is clear why Charlie chose it. It was better to give the impression that Parker knew nothing and, most importantly, not to publish the information obtained. The new moon realized that this prey was not for him. Well, though they will return the money. However, the scandal was to be avoided here. The Valenti was raised in the air, and Parker, as soon as possible, apologized for his arrogance. At home, Lucy, covered with a fever, firmly searched the box, trying to find the money given to her by Charlie for her wedding. In fact, she already knew where they were, but refused to believe it. But as soon as Parker crossed the threshold of the apartment, she immediately approached him and asked, "Didn't you accidentally take the money?" He did not even dispute. "And what? Took? And what of that? Let him ask more if she is so wealthy and can afford it." Lucy, of course, asked, "Where are you from?" And he, in a drunken state, frankly confessed, "Her hahal is really a bunch of money." There was another nuance. Jeremy, the son of the head of the company. The cold ran on the back of Luce. No, it could not be a matter of chance. She made so much effort to take the best of her stocks, hoping to find something even more outstanding. Jeremy, the grandson of a colleague, is in a relationship with Charlie, who even has an apartment near the Nile. So all her words and actions were aimed at making her an intimate relationship with the Parker. The promises of his kindness were uttered only for the purpose of getting out of these connections, retaining his honesty and reputation. No, it's just impossible. At that moment, the Rocco Parker suddenly reached out to the plate of Lucy and took her rice without delay. She was stunned. It was her food. How could he do so? At least his words sounded extremely cruel, as if she did not deserve anything in this house. In his memoirs, she came to life the image of a mother who once persistently stated that she did not deserve anything personal, because everything in her home was purchased for her own money. As a child, she constantly felt famine, and at school she had to maintain the image of an unusual girl who refuses to eat. In the house, the mother was almost not cooked. Only the yellowing, hardened rice, the dried paste, and not too fresh anchovies remained at hand, but it was still reproached for it. At that time, it was extremely painful to see the Charlic expressed her dissatisfaction with her father not prepared egg rolls. Now Lucy was so angry that the dream was indifferently bypassed her. Wouldn't it be fair if Charlie had to taste the disgusting dried rice? Why did everything go wrong? But at this point, verbal attacks cut off communication. She threatened the harshest punishment if she got to the press. All you have to do is continue reading. And that's what happened. It seems that the moment is when it is worth sharing a brief message on social networks. The next morning, this short message turned the internet upside down. Charlie read how she ruthlessly beat an innocent pregnant girl, threatened her, as if betraying her boyfriend with an oligarch, and committing many other crimes against law and ethics. Cheetah also saw it all, so she immediately called, offering to deal with this arrogant Lucy. However, Charlie was unnecessary, although she gratefully perceived such decisive support. Immediately after that, he hurried to Fat, overflowing with the care of the girl. He hastily assured that his situation was not of great importance, because he gained his position on his own efforts and never relied on his grandfather's authority. It was extremely cute. In addition, it was reminiscent of a real series. For her, he did not embody the image of the grandson of the head, but simply remained Jeremy. Due to the anonymous nature of fasting and its placement in a popular public, the opposition of spread was almost impossible. But it was clearly clear who was responsible for it. Charlie has already been used to this, but her interference in the case was a false step. The question will soon be how to punish these two. Of course, this scandal is needed even more to make them understand the consequences of their actions. At dawn, when Parker finally came to his senses, he resolutely reproached Lucy, in detail. in detail the severe punishments that were waiting for them if he found out who he had published this post. Charlie's call unexpectedly intervened. She insisted on removing the post, as serious troubles suddenly began. But why should Lucy take it? After all, she has repeatedly encountered unexpected troubles throughout this period. But Charlie offered the money, exactly what she needs. Of course, if her boyfriend belongs to our circle, you can safely give freedom to passions, getting the most possible pleasure. Yes, it is time to inform Charlie how pathetic the waste of the director's funds looks, especially when she is not significant. Why not organize a meeting for money transfer, say, in a cozy restaurant? However, it is imperative to come with a guard. To carry such a large amount on your own is too dangerous. And so, they got into her trap. At the same time, Charlie gave her the opportunity. She could do honestly and avoid trouble. Finally, the day of the meeting comes and it arrives unexpectedly quickly. Lucy shone in her best dress, like a star of the modeling podium, and behind her with a light whistle stepped Parker. He even trimmed her head from above despite her order not to lay. Of course, her mood was excellent, but not because of it. Charlie and Jeremy were already waiting for them at the big doors, through which they had to enter for safe money. While Lucia laughed, Parker immediately realized that something went out of plan that day, and the girl understood it fairly quickly. They were immersed in sleep during the repair. Finally, the moment came when Charlie and Jeremy smiled happy. The conference on the abuse of power in the company has begun. Lucius Parker had no longer running away. What remarks could not upset Charlie? After all, she did not promise that only they would appear. The press conference began, and the questions of journalists were falling on all sides. Charlie decided to personally answer all the questions. She frankly stated that she was the girl who appears in scandalous publications and that she recently parted with the Parker. However, the main cause of separation was not Jeremy. It left it because she could not meet the extremely high and sometimes absurd the requirements of the future family. Parker rose from his seat and said loudly that she was exaggerating. However, this does not explain why she chose to live next to her son of the oligarch. However, he barely had time to finish his conversation as Utah fell into the room. With victorious confidence, she stated that she was able to help Charlie with the apartment. She presented documents confirming that the girl pays the rent, and Jeremy does not even make efforts to repay utility bills. The most important thing is that she was urgently looking for this apartment, because Parker pursued her former bride, and she even has a photo that confirms it. The young man sharply snatched her photo and swayed that she should take her words back if she really intends to continue his contract with the company. But she was indifferent. Did he really think that after such a scandal he would not be released? Reporters quickly recorded all the details in their notebooks, clicking on cameras not to miss a single important moment. Lucy realized that more time could not be wasted. You need to get out of this situation immediately. The most reliable protection is a counterattack, so she decided to make a claim to Charlie. What did she do for? So as a result, Charlie lost her baby. Charlie was impossible to just forgive. She did not intend to apologize for what she didn't do. She is absolutely convinced that Lucy was not pregnant at all. She turned to Parker, but it turned out that he had never been with a girl in a clinic and saw neither the results of the analyses nor the pictures of the ultrasound examination. To check the situation, it is enough to call the clinic where Lucy was examined and ask the administrator to record it for a second reception. One of the journalists knew exactly the clinic number indicated by the girl. The last attempt was to apply to stop organizing a circus before so many employed people. However, her objection was not necessary. The clinic had already answered. It is clear that Lucy has never been served. Even the re-verification finally confirmed it. Reporters were even palanted to Lucy, realizing that every word of her is a pure lie. A lie and a lie again. Again, she only had to surrender to the eager emotions. All through Charlie, exclusively through her. What, Lucy, did she deserve it? Even Parker, for whom she hesitated to rush to defense, he indifferently threw her away. She was not even pregnant, but talked about miscarriage and made him marry her. In fact, she destroyed his life. He left, and she, without a moment, hurried after him until there was an opportunity to escape. It was the moment when Jeremy took the word to clearly state that the company was in no way related to all this. When asked about their relationship, Charlie explained that there was currently no official connection between them, although sympathy was already present. According to her, they will start meeting if Jeremy does not deny. Reporters again blinded them with bright camera flashes. He agreed happily. Under the table, they silently grabbed their hands, expressed their love without unnecessary words. In the evening, they spent a cozy time at home. tasting the drinks and deciding how, after the official announcement of their union, Charlie would turn to Jerem, because she only used his official address before. There were numerous options for appeals: sweet, beloved, expensive. But they were all too embarrassing, so she decided to limit himself only to his name. In addition, he promised to take on cooking, washing dishes, and cleaning so that she could return home and enjoy a well-deserved rest after work. He gently clenched her hand, and she thought that her touch was radiating softness and tenderness, while in his previous life he was quite harsh. The question of how to behave at work now was simple. Jerry decided to resign. He owned his own security firm created by Sean, the same man who paid for the table of the man with girlfriends. She mocked the claim, "What if I am at work, will you be fascinated by some other girl?" However, this will not happen, because it is already fully owned by her. Charlie, who was spinning into Jermia, did not hear a call from Janina, and did not realize what gifts the fate was preparing for her, sitting on the floor in a darkness and loneliness. But as soon as the occasion, the girl immediately went to her girlfriend. She opened the door, and her face immediately washed tears. After calming down, I started talking about what happened. At first, she paid the attention of the ring constantly disappearing from his finger, and every time he invents incredible excuses. Then, in a dream, he begins to turn to an unknown person, gentle, sweetheart, though he never called his wife. Personal hygiene products were exhausted twice faster, although at first it seemed that it only deliberately increased tension. However, one day she deliberately returned from work earlier and found a stranger to their apartment. Then she could not cross the threshold of the apartment and immediately fled. It seemed that every step inside could lead to the complete destruction of her life. Charlie listened and understood that here is the one who reproduces her own betrayal. Once upon a time, she caught a man who immediately trusted with his mistress. The girl is gentle but confidently convinced the Yanian that it is worth giving up an unhappy marriage, even if the child's fate is at stake. She only grew with her father and felt much more joy than she could if she was surrounded by constant quarrels between her parents. Janine listened carefully to these words and made a decisive decision. It was time to divorce. She has developed household skills and her parents are always nearby. She will no doubt for her daughter, but Charlie will certainly come to the rescue. Together, they are capable of everything. At this point, they became even more close and finally realized that their friendship has a much deeper meaning than just work together. In addition, at that moment in Korea, betrayal was still recognized as a crime and was punished extremely severely, even until 2 years in prison. Together, they found a girl's page with whom the man Janen betrayed her. It had evidence of prolonged and close communication. She casually demonstrated photos without feeling any shame. In addition, Charlie recognized her right away. It was the girl who took place near the January raising. The girl was anger, watching him shamelessly betrayed right under her nose. Now she knew what to do. She will look like she is going on a business trip, but she really returns home to suddenly catch the traitor. As a result of nervous tension, the girl felt acute abdominal pain through which she was literally bent, claiming that she should limit her coffee. In the evening, Charlie met Jeremy again, who worried about her, but she insisted on assuring that everything was fine with her. The girl sincerely thanked him for his assistance, but firmly assured that she could handle everything on her own. He gently hugged her for goodbye, sincerely assuring that she had faith and knows that she would handle everything on her own. The next day, Janen went on a business trip. He smiled and waved her goodbye, believing that the most attractive part of his wife is her back when she leaves. Undoubtedly, he felt the joy of her departure, because it was a great opportunity to enjoy a pleasant time alone. More precisely, he is not alone but enjoys the company of a woman who really loves. He looked with her in the apartment, not suspecting that the police are already on the doorstep. The guards of the law were equipped with cameras that allowed to immediately fix the violation directly on the spot. So, Yanin opened the door of the apartment, interrupting a pleasant time spent at her husband. He failed. In bed with his mistress, he was specifically demonstrated in order to fix the compromising frame. Yanian asks Charlie to wait from the outside, but the girl replies that she needs to do one small business before leaving. She soon took a small chest of drawers and threw it out, clearly emphasizing and openly stating that it would not suffer repeated violation of rest on the part of the man. Going, the girl thought, here they caught a man on betrayal, and later this event brought death in her life. Here the police ran away from the room as if he were thrown from there. Charlie broke out of the inner room and immediately realized that her anticipation was unconditionally correct. Yanin lay on the floor, clearly receiving a powerful blow to the head. Her life was only saved because she was thrown a heavy dresser that could become a deadly trap. After a while, they found themselves in the hospital and talked that Janana, in fact, had great happiness. Her injury was limited only by a slight concussion. Their dialogue was unexpectedly interrupted by the emergence of medical staff. Charlie immediately felt the tension, as this situation could only testify one thing. Yanin's content was diagnosed with stomach cancer, as it has long been suspected. However, the disease was at the earliest stage, so it could be successfully overcome by surgery. Everything thanks to her friend. She prompted Janin to go for an additional examination. Charlie came out of the ward, looking more thoughtful than joyful. At the last moment, her actions were prevented by a colleague. She saved her, though by accident, because she was still convinced that Lucy had already determined her fate. One effect by another, she eventually changed the fate of another person. No, Lucy will be responsible for this. To hand her this nasty fate to make her die right in her eyes in her husband's lover. It is she who is obliged to take away Parker. On Charlie Street, she made an extremely important call. Meanwhile, Parker literally boiled with anger, contemplating the computer screen. Why do these actions fall constantly? Of course, the illusion did not capture it at all. In addition, she again prepared kimchi soup for him, which gave him even more than a bitter red. What else could she cook for him? Both lost their work, they did not have money at all, and the last Parker put their money in stocks. The girl, offended by the sharp words of her husband, was angry, with a loud knock closing the door, and he, without stopping, decided to call from the unfamiliar number from which he had just received the message. The girl explained that she considered this number to be the phone of another guy, but she seems to be confused with several digits. Parker was incredibly satisfied. He spoke with a charming girl who made a great impression on him, and would definitely not miss the opportunity to meet her again. Lucy, immersed in washing, also listened carefully to the feminine voice. But it was a mother-in-law who called to prepare broth from cow hooves. The woman reproached her that her pregnancy never came and stated indignantly, "If Lucy could not be blamed for it, then who is guilty, Parker? If she does not give a family of a new life, there is no room for her." From Charlie, everything could be much better. She never pulled her precious son into quarrels and always brought the necessary income. Evil, Lucy threw fresh washed towels on the floor. Why do everyone talk about this unusual beauty? Here it is. Though worse than Charlie, it is much more beautiful and successful. It deserves more in this life. Even in silence, Parker's thoughts always returned to her. He listened to the tunes that told about separation and carefully viewed her profiles on social networks. What if they have established contact again? Does he really think she will put up with this? Parker has only a way to spend time with a glass with friends because he can no longer pay for a cafe. He could only tell you how he corresponded with some interesting stranger. He did not suspect that this stranger was actually Charlie. She postponed the phone through which she just politely refused to meet. Together with his girlfriend, Chan's name, Karan, they sat in a cafe discussing the situation. The girl did not refuse to help unless any complications occur. It was her voice that heard Parker. That evening, Charlie with Jerry enjoyed coffee, restoring his strength after a long day. The guy laughed that his girl was looking incredibly suspicious. However, he did not just believe her. He fully trusted her words. For what he made for her a brand new phone, as well as because of his resemblance to a sweet dog, he asked for a small reward. She was not sorry at all. She gently stuck in her cheek. Parker returned home at noon, unbearably drunk. Not having time to wash and dress, he collapsed on the bed and immediately plunged into sleep. It was covered by strong suspicions about betrayal. Lucy took the phone and found exactly what she was looking for, a message from an unknown girl. In bed with fierce anger, she immediately sent a message to this unfamiliar number. Subsequently, it turned out that the girl did not know about Parker's marriage at all, because she last copied with him at 11 o'clock in the evening. However, he returned much later. Did he actually spend time with Charlie? Can it be that they have restored the relationship again? The stranger came up to rejoice Lucy and apologized for having a deal with a guy who was already busy. This girl supports her, giving advice on how to catch it hot. Charlie advised her to check, as well as to convince her husband to do so using the reason that her mother-in-law insisted on it. Lucy liked this option. Why not show that she is absolutely healthy? Maybe then we'll finally be left alone. She soon found herself in the hospital, waiting for the results of the examination. Parker refused to come as if she were indifferent, as it was angry and impressed with the insult. Did she really need this baby? The doctor presented the results. Everything was great in Ulyas, but the concentration in the Primado Zoo's parlor was 20 times lower than the minimum level required for conception. Therefore, all the trials and humiliations that she suffered are related to his infertility. Why was it all? After discharge from the hospital, Lucy headed for her mother-in-law. Although her arrival could not be called too late, her mother-in-law still put the girl home and ordered to help with cooking. In the kitchen, a woman gathered. Together, they argued that the daughter-in-law should be extremely strict, as if kept in iron gloves. Not for nothing they stayed here. It seemed that Lucy did not put papers at all with the results of analyses on the table and was in a hurry towards Cracovina. Women immediately plunged in the paper and were surprised to find that these were the results of the study. When doing paperwork, the girl, without looking at, reported, "Yes, that's what they see. Parker Auza has an aspermia through which he cannot have children." Re-analysis unambiguously confirmed this. The blood was shocked. How could it happen? But nothing. They will live happily, even without children. Secondly, mother-in-law realized that staying here became inconvenient, so finding the appropriate occasion, silently came to departure. Their step was completely unnoticed. Fierce in frustration, mother-in-law accused Lucy of aimless curiosity about her husband, and moreover, that she disclosed documents to outsiders. But can Lucy be guilty if she just put a folder on the table, preparing for the preparation of vegetables? She was also sentenced to this act. The woman insisted that the whole situation arose due to inappropriate daughter-in-law. It was the last drop. And if the guilt really lies on it, let it be cut. In addition, who in general needs a man who is left out of work and causes only sympathy? For an elderly woman, this has become too difficult. Suddenly, she felt that her condition was sharply deteriorating. Together with the Vecrafus, she instantly fainted. Lucy sat down next to the woman and examined her carefully. It was obvious that her condition left much to be desired, but she smiled artificially, giving the impression that everything was fine with her. She just came, and her husband will help her mother-in-law, returning from fishing in a few days. Charlie reported that she was feeling true about it. The endless lady has constantly boasted with her excellent health and finally deservedly gained proper recognition. However, she was near Jeremy, and together they discussed marriages made from the calculation. It turned out that he had many friends who joined similar unions, and he from time to time preferred a blind date. It is strange that no one found a special attractiveness in it. Charlie forced him to hand over her phone so she could turn on the camera. She praised him high, insisting that he was real courageous, though at first it may seem frightening. He radiated joy because the girl treated him with great care. Charlie caught this magical moment and even had time to take his picture. He refused to delete the photo. It was at the moment when he began to conquer the girl's sympathy. This frame became of particular importance to him. At that moment, they radiated happiness, enjoying every common moment. The new photos shone on both Charlie and Jeremy. Such moments should be stored not only in photos, but also in memory. Meanwhile, Parker arrived at the hospital. He saw his mother, who was quiet in bed, surrounded by a variety of medical devices and deprived of the opportunity to utter a word. The father explained what happened. She was faint, and due to the lack of immediate help, she developed hemorrhage into the brain. Lucy immediately rushed to bed. All this is her whine. Instead of staying with her mother-in-law at home, she went to cook dinner for her husband, and when there was a need for help, no one was able to come to the rescue. Parker decided that the girl should look after her mother, because only she is not busy at the moment. She will return home every day to cook delicious meals for him and his father. When they took the place in the car, Svekra noticed a bunch of documents and immediately, without unnecessary delay, plunged into their study. Now, even his father got acquainted with the results of the analyses. Are Parker really so had a Primado? The note from Anger flew down the floor. According to the indicators, he is infertile, a feudal puppy, unable to continue the genus. Parker, while at home, shouted loudly on the phone on Lucy, accusing her that she had done this analysis. One by one, there were reports of debt to different banks, as well as that the shares were gradually burned. The only shelter in his hopelessness was the immersion in alcohol. What to do to him? If only Charlie was nearby, she would definitely come to his aid. He decided to call her, and she immediately answered. The mother is in the hospital. There is no money. He feels unbearable pain because they will have to start over. However, he was answered. The voice did not belong to Charlie. The call lifted Jerem. He is Charlie's boyfriend and has every right to go to Parker as he sees fit. In addition, he took over the girlfriend and warned, If she dared to approach her, he would not be congratulated. Parker had no one to shout, because there were no listeners nearby. In turn, Jeremiah expressed everything he wanted and threw the tube. The guy's home was quiet, and Charlie played with a cat, so home and charming. Parker only had to throw the phone and handle everything on its own. But what actually does he have? Everything is because of that fool. As soon as the mother recovers, he will part. At this point, his gaze fell on the newspaper with an advertisement of the Ostrahivka. This is a truly brilliant idea. The wife will be responsible for her own actions. Lucy, comfortably settling at the mother-in-law, complained bitterly with her anonymous girlfriend about this difficult knife. She understood that the woman needed warmth, so she carefully removed her blanket and carefully waved her with a veer. As soon as Parker appeared, I had to lift the blanket higher. She carefully cares for her mother-in-law, but despite all his efforts, the condition of the woman does not improve. What a great pity. The man brought great news. They go on vacation. Her tireless kindness undoubtedly deserves a well-deserved rest. The neighbor came about their departure and offered the number of a familiar seat, thanks to which the hostess quickly returned to normal. Oh no, Lucy cannot afford such a risk. If her mother-in-law begins to recover, she will surely tell that the girl was witnessing how she fainted and did not help. But it was too late. While the girl assured that she could handle herself, the neighbors were already calling the sites and agreeing all the details. No, if she recovers, Lucy will not be able to cure. When everyone left, she remained alone, torn by internal contradictions. It was impossible to leave. This option was simply not considered. But does she not deserve a short break? Why is she to waste her time next to this helpless old woman? Inside, there was a nurse who was going to inject, but the syringe seemed faulty. The girl explained that getting someone else's blood into the body can cost a woman's life. Therefore, you need to use a new tool. Hardly Mitsestra disappeared as Lucy immediately heads to the chapel, although the latter was quite inconvenient. And here the girl leaned to her mother-in-law, holding the syringe in her hand. Nothing. If she dies, she should give way to the living place. It would be unfair if Lucy lost the little bit left to her. He just falls asleep. And that's all. He will only be waiting for an endless, peaceful sleep. He will just leave this world a little earlier. The door call unexpectedly woke up two sober Parkers. The courier brought the parcel. These were the prints of Lucy's correspondence, in which she complained of Parker's family and even on him, without squeezing to laugh at the unconscious mother-in-law. It was the girl who addressed him with a message. These two nonsense was consciously discussing similar topics. From her, thankless ants run. Undoubtedly, the idea of insurance deserves implementation. It is incompatible. She soon feels proper punishment. Without delaying his plan for a long time, Parker went to the parking lot and resorted to brake manipulations. They will not let him down. Hell is waiting for her, and tomorrow everything will end. He only has to play the role of a sad man and then get insurance and finally solve all his problems. Finally, he went into his old Zhigulka with all his soul. It is time to say goodbye to this car, because it is soon waiting for a new car. Charlie was completely lost. She could not understand what was trying to convey to her Lucy. What time does Parker take his mother's killer to the resorts? After all, he read everything she sent him. In her past life, she felt all the charms of being next to this person. In this life, pleasure settled in Lucy, gripping everything, even made her even a better girlfriend. In addition, at that time he intended to issue insurance. Is this trip to get money, the cost of life of your own wife? Parker drank again, enjoying playing cards on his computer. Hey, he is already on the threshold of wealth. A little more and millions will become it. Suddenly he rang the phone and the TPP began a conversation, saturated with shouts and images. But why? All because his mother left this world just when he was immersed in alcohol without stopping. Having grasped the whole situation, Parker instantly climbed into the car. He could not believe that all this was happening. On the road, everything seemed surprisingly slow. He constantly increased speed and insisted that the other driver released his passage. However, one of the trucks remained stationary, which forced to reduce speed, but the brakes did not work because he broke them yesterday. We need to do something, Parker shouted, covered with horror, and directed transport in that direction. The car raced the bridge directly into the bridge. The collision occurred, but the security system worked flawlessly. The air pillow softened the blow in time, saving the Parker of life, and he already felt the joy of surviving. However, the lighter thrown to the car yesterday immediately made itself known. The car unexpectedly exploded, turning the life of Parker. His body swept a burning flame, and each scream cut the lungs. How is it possible? At that moment, the car lost its fragile balance and, as if the temptation of fate, ruthlessly plunged into the water. Will he really die? He planned to buy a new car for insurance. Matisse's funeral took place within one day. Lucy struggled for half of the skewers, beaten with grief and tears. How could they let her leave this world so early? The invited people whispered quietly, looking at the girl. It is said that in the last moments of her life, she did not look away from her mother-in-law, full of compassion for her. Fair sent Lucy to rest in another room. It was difficult for him to watch the tears of insurmountable sadness rolled on her cheeks. She obediently departed, filling the corridor with her pronunciation. Finally, you can give up these empty rails. The throat is already ringing from the sob, and in general, what is it to mourn this freak? I already warned that the point was not that he did something with a car at night, but that he had previously made insurance for a freebie. Through it, everything developed at all as it was. Fortunately, its end has come. Security guards and office staff arrived in Parker once. Charlie was stunned. She could not accept that everything ended so tragically. These people destroyed her life, leaving only bitter memories, but she still wanted to rest in peace. She was their former daughter, in law, so she could not put up with this injustice and resolutely adjust to it. During this period, Lusa carefully mimicked the crying as if all the time spent alone was filled with tears. However, artificially inspired tears dried up immediately as she met Charlie in Utah. What did they do here? It's time to say goodbye. Initially, Charlie condemned her to be a machine tree, then plunged the park into a maelstrom of troubles, causing all possible troubles, and now the moment of farewell has come. However, Charlie did not look for scandals. She has already put all her intentions and therefore decided to just leave. However, Lucy did not intend to let them go so easy. Dumping the girls in all the troubles of the world, she could not hold back tears and suddenly fell to the floor. For Charlie, this caused only contempt, because the knight was strongly assured that it has nothing to do with events. However, Yutva decided that the problem could be solved by a wedge, and she fell to her knees, sobbing. Ah, what will Lucy do now? Staying without Parker and mother-in-law, did she find herself completely alone? Stunned to the heart, the girl stopped playing the role of a completely abandoned victim. Charlie was uniformly to whether Lucy was about to call the police or to do something. She approached her close and stated that she knew whose wine was in the occurrence of a dead. The girl still retained her eloquence. How does she know? How can you not know if Lucy told everything to the little things? No, is it really a mysterious girlfriend, Charlie? It must be expelled before the situation gets out of control. Yes, police. It is necessary to report that she committed the murder of Parker and now even threatens her. Men have clearly found that her name is Lucy. Well, she was detained on suspected murder of her mother-in-law. Her reaction exceeded all the expectations. Breaking out of the hands of the guards of the law, she loudly stated that she had not committed murder, and that only Charlie deserved to check and arrest. However, it turned out that the prosecution has been on its side of the witness. It was the neighbor who offered help as a seat that witnessed how Lucy did her mother-in-law. In fact, she envied Charlie. He had a strong family and many real friends. Little Lucy looked at her with a voice, not understanding what everyone loves. But the secret was to combine. The beauty was complemented by stylish glasses, creating a real charm forever. One day she learned that her girlfriend had no mother, and from this news her happiness did not know the limits. Everything was familiar until it turned out that she had an amazing father. Why did Charlie shine with happiness next to her father, while Alus was constantly suffering from her mother? One day they spent time together, sharing memories of their deceased mother. Charlie was a little sad for her, but near her father, life seemed quite harmonious. That is why she kept a photo of her mother on which the woman looked extremely beautiful. Lucy couldn't believe her eyes. Everything seemed like her father had already left this world. It was because of this that she was beating reproach and image every day. The father went to her, but the mother always argued that the responsibility for everything could not be placed on a lecherous daughter. If she is the reason why the father left the family, then Charlie probably got rid of her mother solely because of her own wrong behavior. All this trouble happened because of her. Now it is because of her actions that Lucy is threatened with imprisonment. How can it be that such a reflective person lives happily? It remains only to cry in the first moments of relentless pain, and shouts immediately broke behind. No tears will save her from imprisonment. On the contrary, as it turned out, if she does not calm down, she will be closed in the police department. However, she still has a chance to defer. Lucy, unable to wait anymore, eagerly asked her to stay with her relatives until the funeral end. And oddly enough, she was even allowed to remain under the close supervision of the police. Escaped about the escape, Lucy strongly asked permission to go to the toilet. However, even before his entrance, it was accompanied by one of the employees. The only detail they did not consider was that the toilet was part of the outbuilding. Thus, Lucy managed to dress quickly, carefully collect hair, and go out unnoticed, without attracting unnecessary attention. The employee did not notice her, fully immersed in working with a smartphone. In that difficult for Lucy a minute on the parking lot, the chief of Smith was steadily traveling. He drew attention to the girl who was hidden in the corner, completely covered with mucus. The man could not leave his pet alone, so without hesitation, he loaded it into his car. He offered her a glass of club milk, but the girl, complaining, asked something hot. As soon as Smith went shopping, she immediately moved to a new driver's seat. "Thank you for the car, older." As soon as she was preparing to move, Lucy noticed how right in front of her appeared Jerks. He was approached by Charlie, who radiated too bright joy for such a day. She enjoys moments at the company of a wealthy man, as if all remained unaddressed. They embrace right in the middle of the public, in her eyes. The girl did not even suspect that at that moment, Charlie made a decisive decision. She no longer needed this place. She wants to just start a new, happy life. No, Lucy could no longer tolerate it. If Rasan is thrown into prison, then let them send them both to that world. Let them feel the full punishment for all their criminal acts. Jeremy focused faster than Charlie. He immediately realized that the two of us did not have time to jump out of the car. Then he pushed the girl so much that she fell on the parking stone, and he came under the car. The gerils hit the concrete strongly, and around it slowly spread the reflectively red lawn. At the entrance to the hospital, the head, Grandpa Jeremy, sat. In his bed, covered with bitter sadness, they cried. He has been unknown for a long time, and the prospects for his recovery remained uncertain. Charlie was tormented by the idea that all the troubles happened because of her. The fate had to move to another person. Someone had to leave life. But who? She promises to finally deal with everything until he is in a consciousness. In the courtroom, Parker's father trembled, holding back restless sobs at the same time feeling that he lost everyone. Suddenly, the door dissolved widely, and Lucy, dressed in prison robe, was brought into a room where it was surrounded by careful reporters. Charlie looked at her with even more hatred, openly pouring her contempt. The meeting began, and Lucy was accused of murder of her mother-in-law. However, at the very end, she categorically denied her guilt. They were invited to witness that old neighbor. She insisted that when a person was given attention, her condition is improving a little. And this woman only gave up every day. As soon as the conversation moved to the introduction of the heir, Lucy whirled, accusing the old man of continuous praise of her youth and beauty. In the end, I had to call the girl in order. The prosecution party presented convincing evidence that the cause of death was air embolism. In addition, records from the DVR confirming Lucy's attempts to stifle Charlie with the Jerks. The lawyer was absolutely nothing to say, so the girl immediately rushed to beat him, looking at the jacket. After all, he is her defender. Why is he silent? In the accusation, she frankly confessed that she was a murderer and did not even regret her actions. Lucy just couldn't understand what was wrong with these people. In the end, she did not do anything wrong. Although, no doubt, all the problems are related to Charlie and Ehakal Jeremy, because he just has a whole bunch of money. Despite the desperate screams of Lucy, the judge made a sentence: life imprisonment. Upon completion of the trial, she met Parker's father at the exit of Charlie. He maliciously told her that if she married his son, nothing would have happened. However, it was not easy to instill a sense of guilt, especially given that he was inaccessible when his wife was humiliated by the daughter-in-law. He was silent because he believed that to treat the girl as a competitor and servant. This is the norm. At the same time, his participation in these deaths exceeded her role significantly. He was much more involved than it could seem at first glance. Returning home, Charlie visited the next apartment and took her lady with her. Together with the cat, she carefully gathered all the necessary things: towels, toys, and bowls. Searching for the necessary things in the Anacarl, she visited Jerem's office, where a calendar hung on the wall for a few months late. One of the dates stood out especially. It was on this day that she returned 10 years into the past. The 2nd October, when she married Parker, was also clearly marked with "Do Not Run." At the bottom of the calendar, the address was indicated, but by 2009, they were written differently. So, the address recording standard appeared only a few years. In addition, a note was added to the calendar. It is impossible this note was addressed to her. Did he also return to the past? In fact, another student has met one girl repeatedly. She loved the flowers and looked after her cats. He often mentioned her, although he was not yet aware that she was arousing special feelings in it. He, as a naive fool, was in vain, spent so much time looking at her, and he never spoke with her until the release. Instead, he had to be satisfied with the only cat he found and brought home. When recruiting staff in the office, he personally insisted that Charlie would join his department. She did not remember him at all, but it did not matter to him. He was tormented every day because he could not answer her the way he wanted, despite the continuous watches of replication. He also remained silent the day she began to approach Parker. It would be better if he spoke with her then and did not remain silent, distracting his gaze to the side. He had to at least offer her meat, but did not dare. When she asked him to write a recommendation to continue the contract, he realized that it was the most valuable contribution he could make for her. She may feel true happiness with the Parker. He only had enough smiles. However, he saw from afar as Parker cares for Lucy. He heard how he frankly told the girl that she was much beautiful. Jeremiah frankly stated that he would not suffer that he was in vain to chat in the kitchen when others perform his task. Parker did not want to admit that Charlie was engaged in drawing up documents on his behalf. One day she appeared in fresh Serga, who gave her a traitor Lucy. He then stated that they did not fit her at all, although he was in mind that Parker did not taste like. When she married Parker, he finally decided to leave his job. Several years have passed, and then there were rumors that she became ill. When he entered her ward, Charlie was gone. There was only a chapel. Realizing that the girl escaped, he immediately sat in the first taxi and hurried to her home. He could not hold back. He was to greet her. He did not dare to go to the house until he heard her cry. And then there was no doubt. He rushed to her. However, when he entered the apartment, he immediately realized that it was too late. He only had to carry her in his arms and persuade to return to consciousness. Then he appeared at her funeral, organized by himself. Police officials reported that she had no relatives who could be addressed and gave her phone. There were many videos with cute cats and bright flowers. Although time has passed relentlessly, her love for these shots remained unchanged. If only he was able to go back. But it was too late. He only had to cry, kneeling before her photo. On that day, Yanian appeared to say goodbye to Charlie on his last way. Sitting nearby, she sighed sadly. It seems that the guy has never opened his feelings to the girl. And now too late. Why didn't he never take the first step? What restrained him? It is Charlie, and she would be at least friendly to him. Riadaza, along with her girlfriends, visited the funeral. They were surprised to discuss the fate that turned out to be incredibly horrible. How can you lose life on his last day when a man and his best girlfriend are nearby? Lucy disappeared, and none of them is connected. They all carry great guilt in front of Charlie. There is only one thing left: apologize in a lifeless picture surrounded by mourning flowers. Utah remembered the girl as a good, responsive personality who always supported her during working together. She believed that in the next life, their roads would certainly cross again. Hugh, not dare to open his heart to his beloved, also left tears on the wooden floor. After meeting with the funerals, he sat in Toxie and went to the sea. The fear of freezing on the coast did not torment him, because in memory there were memories of a person who spent all his life in the endless cold of loneliness. He was taken away by the toxist who once evacuated Charlie from the hospital. He told a warm tone that his daughter was marked by high height, beauty, and kindness. It is the person like Jeremy who would be perfect for him. The leader realized that it was Charlie. If he had the opportunity to live anew, he would give her everything he had. Finally, they arrived. It is no longer burdened with material worries. The girls gave a toxic amount, which significantly exceeded the required volume. In the end, it will not harm anyone. Once upon a time, she taught him to draw hearts to celebrate everything that fascinated him. Then he wondered it in the bill that she suddenly got into his hands. It was this bill that he gave the taxi driver, guaranteeing that at least a small sign of love would remain alive. And he will probably go to where his place is, really. To sink in the end, it is not so scary, isn't it? However, as soon as he opened his eyes, a picture unfolded in front of him, which did not resemble the majestic afterlife, but was a familiar space. His native office. It was April 10th, 2009, but how could it happen? There was Charlie nearby, live in full energy. It was then that Parker raised his voice again, directing him directly to her. He was determined to do everything on him so that she feels true happiness and more often gifts the world with his smile. When Charlie opened this letter, she could not hold back tears. He also had transformed. He wrote it for her and returned to save her. If he has kept it all this time, now is the time when she has to do everything for his good. She did not have time to express everything she wanted, and there are many unforgettable moments in front of them. If he wants to stay close, he needs to open his eyes as soon as possible. Charlie did not suspect that at the very moment beyond his life, Jeremy again saddled in the same taxi. He was sitting in the back seat, overflowing with sad determination. The driver, even fascinated the desire of the new moon to take on Charlie's fate, died instead. But there is a person waiting for him. Jeremy should make a happy Papam Princess Charlie. It is not time to die. You need to return. When the Jerry's eyes opened unexpectedly, he saw Charlie. He was tears that gently clenched his hand. It seems that she did not hope for his recovery, and as soon as she realized that he had come to her senses, immediately rushed to his neck. But why didn't he tell her a word? Why did he hide the truth for so long? After all, he knew her well, even knew about her inevitable death. How long did he plan to keep silent? When they went for a walk in the park, Charlie confessed that she had been reincarnated and briefly touched her past. It is unknown why this thought appeared, but she came to mind how the desire to taste the black paw was once burned. After repaying the debt, there is little left, so she resorted to a fast cooking. The mother-in-law immediately rushed to her. Instead of treating her husband dinner, she sat, ate something incomprehensible and waste. In the end, it is already satisfying, and it is indifferent that the plate is almost intact. Let him prepare shrimp for lunch. Soon, Parker, along with her mother-in-law, enjoyed the dishes, while the girl was silently washing dishes. After lunch, the man passed the remnants of dishes generously. It was then that she was covered by the idea that he is not so bad, because something good was hidden in his heart. When she realized that everything was completely different than it seemed, it was too late. That is why she decided to radically change her life. However, everything turned out to be not so easy. To escape from the relentless fate was a real test. She had to deal with the same events again, but in another environment. However, there were things that bypassed the Charlie, but certainly affected his loved ones. She was so scared that he was ready to sacrifice her own life to save her. He promised to defend her until the last breath and never leave her. At the same time, a muted atmosphere of tragedy was felt around Utah. But her thoughts were occupied by Hugh, who worked hard in his cafe. She decided to go, though she was worried that the young man had already started closing the cafe. In addition, he also prepared pudding for her. Hugh glowed with golden hands, but only his baking could melt the heart of Utah. To see such a reaction brought him real pleasure. Undoubtedly, he would gladly meet her more often because he always kept a delicious piece. Although this piece always belonged to Charlie, Nadia was in vain. Everyone knew that she was meeting with Jeremy. In fact, Hugh has long lost hope because he has repeatedly seen how she was closely focusing on the boss. Although he is no longer full of hope to keep the last piece, there was only one act he could do. How attractive he is, and at the same time, stupid. If he continues to speak, Utah will sooner or later want to return to him again. The same evening, Miss Yanin returned home. For the first time in a long time, the road to her native land gave her much more pleasure than the usual trip to work. Suddenly, she noticed that there was a derrick nearby. From which time did he choose the subway? Is it more convenient? Without deepening in the conversation on this, the young man reached out by Janek Padir. She did not refuse, but on the contrary, she became interested in the song that was heard from the headphones. Under the sounds of the melody, the derricks, as if turning to himself, frankly confessed to love to the Kianin. Immediately, she removed the headphones and resolutely stretched the plea. No, this is not what she needs. Derek categorically refused to return the gift. If it does not need it, let it just throw it away. Finally, having heard the order, go home, Yanin plunged into her player's music. Suddenly, she had to rush to her stations. She almost got under the closing the door, and she could not push the player with her zone colleague. On the doorstep of the house, the girl was met by an unexpected and alarming surprise. Her husband hid in the dark, away from the lantern, aware of her. Obviously, this meeting did not meet the expectations at all. A dark evening in the abandoned yard created a notorious atmosphere. What does he do here? She persistently stated that communication should only happen through a lawyer. He tried to seem friendly. His main desire was that she revoked the claim. Undoubtedly, she clearly refused, and even more so that he tried to manipulate her daughter. However, when she shared with Charlie with all the details, her girlfriend advised to withdraw the claim. It is unknown how much time this law will save, and if it is abolished, this person will be more likely to be angry than it was at first. This can be truly dangerous. It is best if it outlines the conditions under which it will part with it and withdraw the claim. When Janan returned home, she was overtaken by Derek. However, she unambiguously made it clear that she has a man, even if his status is now almost a former, as well as her daughter. Such a new moon did not arouse her interest. However, it seemed that it did not worry at all. He proposed to accompany a colleague because no one knows what a man can think. In the cafe where we agreed the meeting, I did not give the traitor an envelope with a document containing the divorce conditions. The conditions included not only the compensation, but also the preservation of the apartment, the organization of dinners, and the rejection of parental rights. Where did she get that the apartment belongs to her? In the end, she paid for her from her own expense because he was only in a small financial hardship. What is the monetary compensation? Didn't she start to behave brazenly? So yes or no? The choice is made. I left the documents intact and left the cafe, not at all paying attention to how the man rushed after her. Filled with anger, he tried to exchange compensation for parental rights. His daughter was indifferent, and he categorically did not want to pay compensation. Of course, she refused. Realizing that his desire would not come true, he decided to strike his ex-wife. However, the hand collapsed on a conductor that served as a shield for Jainen. No wonder he warned that this situation could be dangerous. Derek confessed that he was not frightened by the idea of getting a couple more strokes. He would gladly add another point to the accusation. It was incredibly humiliating, so the traitor just turned and left without looking at anything. He came to her help, though Janin did not need it or even asked. She turned him the player and was going to go on. In the end, she can't get it into her problems. Looking at the girl's back, Derek pulled a tiny box out of his bag. Soon, her daughter will celebrate her birthday. It is this holiday, friends, celebrated a few days in a special playground in the park. Yatoi made every effort to entertain the baby, feeling the incredible pleasure of every moment of communicating with her. Before leaving, Jeremy Mila said goodbye to Charlie, and everyone immediately noted what a wonderful couple. No one suspected that at the same moment a car stopped around the corner, in which, along with his mistress, was Yanin's ex-husband, thinking something insidious. If he takes his daughter, he will be able to persuade his wife to give up his requirements, to stop demanding compensation, and perhaps even to hand over to him. He would go for the girl himself, but his mistress is not able to control. So, let her go. It was at that moment that they decided to play in the fascinating game of the hiding place. When the little girl went to hide, she suddenly came across a lovely bunny, as if she looked at her own corner. However, this hare was only a clever bait. Hearing the cry of the baby, Janin jumped rapidly on her horse and went to the scene. The girls immediately rushed to the chase of a mistress who was running away with the baby. She had time to bring the baby to the car and even complained that she was too heavy. However, Utah suddenly attacked the tuna, and Charlie immediately grabbed Janin's daughter, having managed to save her from danger. The trail made from the strength of the ox and iron was ready to snatch every strand of the hair of the kidnappers. And this is still the most favorable circumstances. The former man, Janin, while maintaining dignity, decided to escape until his turn came to take away. However, his father, Janan, did not allow him to escape. He almost pulled out of the cabin of the car of the traitor, determined to carry out justice. And in general, who dreamed of calling this unimportant creation of the test? After all, they all found themselves in the police department. The man played the role of the victim carefully, and his mistress shed tears quietly. Then she began to blame YouTube of an unfounded attack on her, insisting that she had never killed a baby. All this is not true. The police officers offered to agree on reconciliation and avoid noise in the department. To agree? Is it normal? When the mother is abducted by the mother and they are advised to negotiate? However, the real scandal failed to ignite. Just at this moment, the door opened and 3 men entered the room. Among them was a lawyer who immediately announced that he would defend the interests of the right man. From the actual evidence recorded on the recorder, it became clear that the man of Yanin did not seek to meet his daughter, as he claimed, and really stole her. Having learned new details, she swept the rage. Only the presence of the guards of the law stopped her from immediate retribution. Janana visited the lawyer, finding himself in the brother of Derek and immediately agreeing to take up her business. Derek himself, strictly looking at the police officer, guessed that a man could have intended to cover things up. Ms. Yanin seems to have not even suggested that there would be so many people on her side, and that someone would offer her such good support. On the street, when everyone parted, Charlie explained that she was calling Jeremy, and he had already invited the rest of the men personally. Janin was not going to go. She would wait until the Derek leaves the territory. Her brother deserves gratitude for her help. It turned out that some time ago, Derek asked Charlie to intervene when needed. Today, without delay, she immediately called her lover. Finally, when they said goodbye, I decided not to spend time waiting. It took a long time before the brothers finally left the site. By this time, the girl's hands have already wooled and the phone has completely discharged. First of all, Derek was worried because she was freezing, and later he was taken over her daughter's problems. Because she waited for him and wants to thank? Why not go to eat together? He expressed his proposal without waiting for her approval. However, Jana's gratitude was so majestic that she agreed. Yes, they go to enjoy the meat together because it is always what she goes. Finally, Derek was able to hand her the same box to give her to her daughter. The filling of the gift was extremely sweet, and the image of the mother with the baby in the layer as if they were leaving a subtle hint. He really likes that Janan has a daughter. A new working day began, and when other employees had already plunged into business, the chief of Smith hurried to his desk. It was his third time late, so I did not force him to make an explanatory note. As she occupied the highest office than he had, she had every reason to demand it. While Smith assured that her position was not really so significant and also emphasized the need for greater honor of the elders, Derek found something really interesting on the company's website. It turned out that the message announced the increase of Janin. From now on, she has the right to demand a written explanation from him, isn't he? During the break, the girl enjoyed the tea on the roof when she suddenly tightened her, which was approaching from behind. She won the case and now, by law, was a free woman, but it is better to avoid any contact with her. After all, she is just a lonely mom. Despite everything, Derek Vishepke told the girl that she had fallen from the first meeting, and later his sympathy only increased when he learned her better. He helped her. Why not go on a date at least as a manifestation of gratitude? On the same day, Charlie and Jeremy gathered at the door of the head, which, for unclear reasons, called them both. When the door opened, the man sat quietly at the table, reading carefully the newspaper, and did not radiate signs of anger at all. It turned out that Charlie has recently abandoned her raise. Jeremy tried to explain the situation on her own, but the head interrupted the young man, and it was the girl who raised the question of the reasons for this decision. She strongly stated that she was seeking to gain her own efforts and did not need additional support. Charlie confidently abandoned the new position. It would be unfair to receive it when, for example, Janin increases due to his own achievement, not through connections with the head of the head. The head was stunned. Can she give up his position, even if he explains that the decision is made in view of her merit? The girl declined strongly, leaning with almost sacred respect, and left the office. Only Jerem remained, embarrassed but overflowing with his girlfriend. The head was extremely satisfied with what he saw. But why did the girls bring her only now? That's what his dishonesty had to be. However, it seems that the wedding will not happen, and the young man states that wine does not lie on him. The head was convinced that if the grandson behaved accordingly, she would not give up the wedding. Did he prepare for her? Clean it at home, wash the dishes, and take her out of work, as well as to work? If he did not even perform this basic set of responsibilities, it is strange how Charlie still remains with him. However, the Jiraiya did perform all these actions. He could not afford his beloved, especially after a hard day at work, to take it up. The problem is not in it, he told Jerem, and deeply upset left the office. The head was already calling the director Oliver to find out if his grandson failed to face some stressful situation, which he could not know about. Jeremy wondered why the wedding would not happen. In fact, some time ago, he accidentally heard Charlie talked about an intimate relationship, confirming that he was not planning to marry in this life. She sought to create her own happy life, first of all, being in harmony with herself. As it turned out, Charlie was already waiting for him outside the office. Despite the obvious excitement, the head had nothing extraordinary. They did not pay attention to the woman standing nearby in a modest suit. The instant outbreak on her phone briefly flashed, which testified to the photo just taken. The next morning, Charlie wound Jeremy to work. Although they were not spouses, they still took care of each other. However, the young man did not want to go somewhere and absolutely did not intend to let her go. The phone rang quite timely, and Charlie had to insist that he would take the tube. No one knew. Maybe there was a really important thing. It turned out that the case was true. On the grandson of the head of the big company, they again paid close attention. Someone published an article about their allegedly future wedding. Charlie decided not to dive into the experience because of it. At the conference, she gained invaluable experience. Rumors remain only rumors, and there is no point in responding to them. So she just went to work. Articles remain articles, and no one will do things for her. At the entrance to the bitter, clearly upset about what happened, Jeremis apologized for creating inconvenience again for Charlene. If not for him, they would not talk about it everywhere. But for him, despite any life circumstances, the most important thing was her happiness. If she decides to leave, he will not interfere and accept her choice. It was not the most nice news that could only be heard. Charlie strongly came out of the car and with an angry passion opened the door that was on the part of Jeremy. The young man kept his breath, struck by an unexpected turn of events. He intended to make her go so that she would find her own happiness without him. But who gave him the right to decide for her? Let the youth stop balloting nonsense and take it to the office. Standing in the elevator, hidden spinametalps, they were forced to listen to gossip about their relationship. Jerem barely restrained not to speak all his thoughts about them as a real gossip. However, Charlie grabbed his hand, giving a hot look, and made it clear that it would not affect her. After a few minutes, they reached their floor, and the request to get the road immediately attracted attention. Standing at the open door, Charlie calmly stated that although the wedding had not yet taken place, they love each other sincerely. The elevator went, leaving behind embarrassed employees. The girl turned to Jeremy, confessing that she had painful to hear the words about possible divorce, and persistently noted that she no longer wanted to hear such statements. In addition, the case was not limited to only one aspect. All information channels were loudly conveyed that the relationship of the grandchildren of one of the largest companies was developing rapidly. No one could ignore this information, even though it was behind the lattice. No, it can't be like this. How did Charlie marry him if he turned out to be so rich? Neighbors on the camera, witnesses to Lucy's tragedy, did not share her condition. They called the staff to somehow quench her anxiety. Lying in the infirmary, she tirelessly sought enlightenment. What can be done to spoil Charlie the opportunity to feel true happiness? Of course, the only thing that remains is to call her. However, first you need to find the same person who meets all the requirements. The girl approached the staff to persistently persuade them to hand her a phone. She did not call anyone this month. She urgently needs to talk to her family. Can she refuse? Although it was strictly forbidden, she was still given the opportunity to make a call. Without delaying, Lucis scored her father's phone number. Despite his request not to call this number, I have to express my opinion. After all, he still sees the woman for whom he left his wife. Let him know the maid that her daughter marries a wealthy husband. It is undoubtedly to visit the bride, but it is even better to appear at the wedding. Lucy handed over the address, and in the last moments, the conversations were persistently ordered that no one would mention that she had called. As soon as colleagues are aware of which family the Charlie comes from, it will be immediately expelled from the company. And even if this information can be hidden, the head will categorically not allow his granddaughter to marry such an apartment. Not suspecting, Charlie sat quietly in the ambulance office and engaged in correspondence. And in the meantime, Jerry Mish was already preparing for action. It was at this point that she approached her and quietly whispered that her mother was waiting at the entrance. However, this cannot be. The woman left the house many years ago. Where does she come back now? Charlie still went down. She was already waiting for her, dressed very simply, who instantly showed her admiration at first glance at the girl. This is really her invaluable daughter. The mother immediately rushed to her, stuck around her neck. Here is a woman from a photo. She really came back. A shy smile blossomed on Charlie's lips. Her mother came to her as if she had long been sad for her daughter. They did not notice Jeremy at that moment, but he saw them well and already called someone to clarify the situation a little. So Charlie, together with her mother, sat in a cafe, listening carefully to the stories of how it turned out that they were met right now. The mother assured that she was always nearby, but shame prevented him from getting closer. Now she does not even apologize. She will be enough if they can sometimes meet. The waiter brought the girl a plate of a delicious omelet, and her mother immediately noted that she had adored eggs since her childhood. And it seems that this passion has not disappeared to this day. However, if she remembered her habits so well and really took care of her, and if she intended to come, why did she never call? Why didn't I appear on the burial of her father? There were too many questions about this woman, but she did not want to ask them. There will always be some reason. After her visit to the cafe, the woman took her daughter home. But when she was offered to visit, she politely refused. She is enough for her to eat and enjoy a walk, so she does not want to impose her presence. Finally, Charlie decided to ask a question. She came after she noticed an article about the wedding. However, it seemed that the woman first learned of marriage. Then the girl explained that the wedding was not planned, despite the fact that she has a boy. However, the woman stated that only the happiness of the baby is most important for her. And for the first time in many years, Charlie was able to hug her and call her mother. If she had heard a telephone conversation between her mother and her husband, she would not feel the joy not instantly. The woman described in detail to him her plan to give herself a caring mother, so that using the trust of her daughter to get money from her, while still possible, they will be able to pay off all debts and enjoy a wonderful life. After all, no decent girl will leave her mother without money, especially when her wealthy guy is near her. Completely satisfied with the situation, the woman strongly closed the phone and, singing, aimed at doing her business. She did not notice a young man standing outside the light circle. However, he still saw her and listened carefully. Jeremy came to light to turn to a woman. He is the same wealthy woman, and she can openly make him all his requirements. Oh, look yourself. This is he, her future. And he seems to hear anything, right? However, he heard and refuses to listen to those tales of a passionate love for Charlie, how much she pleases. And what does he say? How can you deal with your future mother-in-law, but this drunken injustice? She will definitely bring everything to her daughters. Let her tell how she took away all the savings registered by Charlie, along with the funds accumulated by her father, and put them in the case of a lover. Also, let him tell how she accidentally came across the article of Svadbe, and finally decided to overcome those 2 hours of writing that still separated her from her daughter. Does he dare to talk like that? What really checked her personal data? Okay, so it will be. She will do as he insists. Only if he received the money, she will immediately leave and no longer appear near Charlie. The woman handed over a note with all the details to transfer the funds to her account and departed, extremely satisfied that she would not have to wear the role of a caring mother. She did not even suspect that her phone lying in the bag was turned on and broadcast every word of this conversation. To whom? So, Charlie, who accidentally gained the wrong number. The girl sat on the floor covered with tears. She was clearly aware that this woman did not need it. She came only for the sake of money. However, she finally had a real maternal care, albeit for a few hours. Jeremiah stood lonely in the rain, and a conversation between him and the girl became a conversation, during which she clearly expressed his desire to be alone, emphasizing that he should not approach her. Oliver tilted his head this evening as a sign of deep respect, meeting an exquisitely dressed woman at the airport. She was dissatisfied that Jeremy did not meet her, though she acknowledged that his duties could detain him. She felt some pride that she did not harm the cheese. A smart girl never acts without thinking. The gorgeous car cut the rain, vividly distinguished against the background of cheap toxes. The woman discussed with Salver the unexpected appearance of Charlie's mother on the horizon and her arrogant desire to get out of money from her beloved daughter. Recently, her mother was sitting in a cafe, covered with tormented reflections on whether her decision was correct. She was not interested in the morality of the act. She thought that as Jeremy, she exposed everything, she would not receive any reward. It is necessary to lure the girl to her side. It was she who initiated the meeting to find out something. However, it was already out of time. Charlie quietly noted that if she really needed money, she could honestly ask them, because she was also in her, not just in Jeremy. She stated that she would immediately receive money if the mother was openly confessing to where she learned about the wedding. It turned out to be Lucy. Will she never take herself in hand? Perfectly. Meeting them no longer makes sense. Charlie went because the common dinner was not interested in her. But how about money? Did she mislead us? Naturally, the mother does not think that the only one who is able to deceive is she herself. And you, Podadevchenko, how is you not ashamed? How does she dare deciding to mock her mother? Now she will show how to cheat people and lie without looking away from their eyes. However, she failed to have time to strike. A strong hand immediately grabbed his fist, preventing him from dropping on Charlie's head. It was the woman with whom Oliver met. She firmly stated that she would never allow anyone to treat her precious daughter. Who is she? Charlie, she's not your daughter. Lower her hands. Oh no. Charlie is the daughter of a company that everyone is proud of. The company has invested much more resources and efforts than that hopeless mother. In the end, Grace is Jeremy's mother and therefore Charlie's mother. Let the girl return home. Adults can handle without it. The assistant had already taken it, and none of the audience looked at the mother's cries. This angry woman decided to leave her mother and even receive support from others. She always believed that the rich were known for their coaching, but now she sees that they are absolutely not restrained. However, what right do those who have quit their children to speak about true upbringing? She left her daughter and now insists that her opinion should be taken into account. Charlie's mother was in full horror. listening to stories about numerous criminal schemes, illegal loan, treacherous fraud, misconduct, and many other unlawful actions. Their cohabitant is not only criminal liability, but also non-payment of taxes from which they were so cunning. How was it possible, being under the oppression of debt, to treat your daughter? The woman shuddered. That's what she did not expect at all. The frank truth that she suddenly hit her head. In the end, Grace came to assure that a peaceful life was no longer destined for this woman. She is not going to keep empty chats. People are conducted, not pigs. Charlie's mother stayed in an empty cafe. It was selected from both hope and last drops of dignity. On the street, Grace was already looking forward to Charlie and Jerry. The girl pressed against him, finding her only support in the young man. She wept, leaning against his shoulder because now this man became her only support. At home, Charlie said she had accidentally heard their conversation. It is incredibly cruel. If the mother frankly admitted that she needed money, she would make every effort to find them, but made it extremely. Then Jeremy stated that when he was in her situation, he would have done the same thing and no doubt would feel such emotions. He is also deprived of a real mother, while Grace was only a mother for Utah. Once upon a time, as a child, he stood on the doorstep of the school, watching the parents withdrew other children and patiently waited for his driver. On that day, he first met the Grace that came to him, carrying a bright, large red umbrella. She leaned to him, and then her face opened her face for the first time. He was in an office suit and shoes that were already soaked, but she still went slowly so that he did not have to hurry. He understood Charlie, but was also convinced that thanks to his strength, she would easily handle everything. The girl wiped tears, and after these words, the spirit of courage was burning in it. Finally, she realized that she was able to protect herself. Charlie strongly rose from the sofa. She has a place to get to simplify her future. It was a prison, which was also filled with sad rain. Lucy was led to Charlie Convoy. She became thin and lost her former beauty. However, as if meeting an ancient girlfriend, he blossomed with joy. Now only a transparent partition stretched between them. They have not met for a long time, and it is time to end this problem. Lucy smiled malice. Probably Charlie came to complain about the unexpected termination of the engagement. But no. With a light smile, the girl confidently noted that she and Jeremy are in a wonderful relationship. What is the facial expression I am? Does she really not rejoice in her girlfriend? After all, she worked so tirelessly to bring her mother back. Lucy sparkled. Why does she behave that way? Why does she not pour all her outrage on Charlie? Oh, she has good reasons, and only the absolute idiot could not understand them. Once upon a time, precisely because Charlie's mother refused to recognize her lover's daughter as his own, his father, Lucia, left his family and did not take the child with him. If it weren't for the girlfriend, she could grow up near her father, not in the infinite darkness that her mother created. Charlie selected everything from her father, husband, and work. Even her freedom of will was cruelly stolen. How could she decide to destroy someone else's happiness? And now she came here, as if seeking to create an image of holy innocence. However, Charlie's face kept calm. What a pity existence. She should open her eyes to reality. Unfortunately, only the authenticity belonged only to those who were in custody. Lucy will not be able to subtract anything in Charles, because now she has the strength to protect everything she belongs. No, where does she go? Let it stay, let us talk a little. One here to sit so much. Their roads have gone forever. There are no more meetings. Lucy's loneliness does not cause any resonance in the hearts of others. Everything that once connected them has disappeared without a trace, and nothing keeps them together. It is harmful that most of life was surrounded only by lies. On the street, he was already waiting for the priests. The rain finally ended. Lighting sunlight, they looked into a cloudless sky and looked with confidence in a bright future. Soon they went to visit Utah, where they were sincerely met with joy and warmth. They were waiting there. The head, along with the Grace, already covered the table, preparing for a prominent event. All together took place. Charlie felt a little inconvenience because of vigilant looks, but it was her birthday, and everyone sought to give her joy. She was even brought in an incredible cake. The girl could not get rid of excitement. In the end, the head himself sat next to her at one table. However, it seemed that everything was only waiting for her smile, filling the space with bright light. They enjoyed the joint time at the table, spending several hours in warm conversations, and at the sunset, the moment of farewell came. Then Grace stretched the girl with a letter of health wishes, written shortly before this day. In addition, she suggested that she be called a mother. Now they have formed a single family where unnecessary formalities have no room. Everyone gets in the car, and the charm begins to open the letter. It was the most dull message that she ever received from her mother. Grace expressed his joy that she had such a daughter-in-law and advised her not to pay excessive attention to gossip and speculation. Charlie did not realize how she fell asleep. And when she woke up, she realized that they had already reached Busan and are now sitting in a car on the picturesque coast of the sea. Jerry had a bunch of papers he presented me. Was he going to spend some briefing here? The young man began to list things in his hands. Stocks and documents certifying property rights. Charlie broke him up. Does he really intend to give her all this? Jeremy interrupted her and handed over a receipt, in which he pledged to support any Charlie's business initiative after the wedding. And without hesitation, for the sake of her happiness, he is ready to make any effort. It was incredibly cute. Charlie, covered with excitement, opened a window to fit fresh air. He was aware that the concept of happiness in everyone, and that he would certainly make his mistakes. Then Charlie remembered the words of the taxi driver who drove it from the hospital. Soon she will recover, return her youth, cleverly do things, and meet a wonderful young man. Here he is, a young man who will give her true happiness. The box opened, opening the beautiful and, no doubt, an extremely valuable ring. However, he was already convinced that she did not intend to marry. Even realizing this, he was driving for hours, carefully listing all the charms of married life. However, it does not matter that she does not want to marry now. Her feelings for him are true and unconditional. Why not try to become a support for each other in their own life? Undoubtedly, they are waiting for true happiness. The next day, they did not even have to go to work because they avoided meetings with regular alarming news. The AFHEV, which he worked tirelessly, gradually closed. But most importantly, how are you with Utah? According to Jeremy, the young man met with Hay. Charlie was pleasantly surprised because she had not heard about it before. Is Jeremy smarter than Charlie? How can she not be offended? In the evening, the girl ran to Utah's house, and as soon as the door closed, she said loudly that Hugh was going to study in Switzerland. Although she claimed that she was indifferent and there was no reason to go to the airport at the moment, tears still penetrated through her indifference. If they are nothing for each other, why did Hugh leave a small piece of dessert every day? He was convinced that Charlie would never appear. Utah is indispensable for her. What she is. He was preparing a cappuccino pudding in the style of Rastad, whom Jermina's girl could not withstand. However, his sister loved him from all her heart. A new day came, and not suspecting, he was quietly walking in the airport, looking for his gate. Suddenly, a cry came at a fresh airport. It was a Utah who, no matter what, raced towards. In her spectacular breasts, she loudly and clearly stated that she liked her, and now she can do anything with this information. At first, he apologized to you, as if he had something to apologize. Then he asked her to wait, as if promising that he would soon prepare a dessert worthy of her. He said that every night when preparing a dessert, he dreamed of seeing how a pudding or pastry fascinated the face of his beloved. But one day, Charlie suddenly visited, and he, without hesitation, gave her a fresh dessert. It was then that he realized that the memories of his former love had not disappeared from his heart. However, if no one else takes this cozy space before his return, and if he is able to give his heart exclusively to her, then he will offer to start meeting, and they will be together. She carefully removed the gum from her hair and stretched her young man. He must return before the eraser breaks. While they stood together, the first snow began to fall from the sky. In less than an hour, the aircraft had led him to Switzerland. Utah, the last moths, looked at him, disappeared in the sky, and then quietly moved, cozily wrapped in a scarf. At the same time, Charlie and Jerry, looking at the shimmering snow outside the window, enjoyed the rest of the winter morning. The time has passed relentlessly. The tireless perseverance of the new moon melted the heart of an impregnable beauty, and she agreed to the wedding. The event impressed with its grand scale. The workers hurried back and forth, waving the petals that fell gently from the flowering cherry. Charlie shone in an elegant dress, much more magnificent than a Parker wedding. In her eyes, a gentle comfort prevailed, so it seemed that the heart was almost jumping out of passion every time she looked at the girl. Even the belly was barely visible, but Charlie was already waiting for the twins. The phone was rang, and at the other end of the line heard the voice of Hugh, which had just returned from Switzerland. She slowly left the bride's room, barely throwing her gaze on the screen. She was carefully prepared for this meeting. Utah finally answered the call. Huni Ajidan did not regret the words, praising her fresh hairstyle. Did he see it? Yes. It was enough to look out the window, and she saw a young man with a suitcase who stood just a few meters from her. This morning he returned and hurried to the wedding, although the solemn event was just a reason to meet Utah. He brought to her a suitcase filled with the most exquisite Swiss chocolate. Every time he encountered something wonderful or incredibly delicious, without delaying the thought of her. It happened without deliberate intention, but over time he realized that anyone who welcomed and asked for something did it only for the sake of Utah. In addition, he fulfilled his promise. Her gum has not yet failed. Unable to stand up, Uta immediately rushed to Hugh, tightly wrapping his neck. How did she really expect him? Together, they welcomed Charlie. The young man was already set to dive into his business with the most seriousness, and the girl was not about to let him go. A company of girls with girlfriends appeared, incredibly cheerfully acting before everyone and fascinating with their energy. The door dissolved, and the daughter of Yanin flew from them. She grew up a little and now fun running in the Pramatra. She was not accompanied by Derek soon. Together, they were photographed under cheerful screams of a girl who was sure she met a real fairy. Jeremy looked like a commander who was ready to take his own in the battle soon. But it was only enough for the future children, as his face shined with blush and happiness. The chairman of the council handed Charlie a bouquet made by him. Although the bouquet was not perfect, its creation was imbued with sincere love. The girl was infinitely moved. The gentleman, of course, was also present at the wedding, because she occupied the place of honor of the most important place in this festive gathering. When Charlie, perfectly ready for the holiday, finally appeared before Jerry, the wind seemed to deliberately dispel the sakura petals, wrapping it with a gentle pink glow. The groom glowed with nobility, looking greatly at her. Of course, Utah did not refrain from a light smile in his address, so they were ready to walk on the wedding podium, heading towards a happy family being. He was waiting for her for so long that if necessary, he would be happy to give the same amount of time. The ceremony was carried out personally by the head, who insisted that such an important task could not be entrusted to someone else. A short distance from the crowd was a table with a photo taken by Charlie. It seemed as if she had also come to accomplish her in a happy future. They were declared their husband and wife. Although there was no hope for a certain future, they now belonged to each other and could count on the support of a large number of people with a good heart. At this wedding, a real girlfriend caught a bouquet. Utah Niderpelev impatiently stole on the spot, ready to catch the symbol of her future marriage. The holiday was flowing in its own way. Someone shed tears, someone enjoyed a wonderful cake, but all united a single atmosphere of joy and pride. Finally, here they are all, family and friends. People who will never leave Charlie and Jerry, always staying side by side and again, reaching for help. The months flashed so quickly that they had the impression that they did not exist. Charlie was about to give birth to twins. A loud bustle with consumption woke her up, and with her woke up with Jeremy, who worried much more than the expected mother herself. The girl with anxiety was staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was rounded and darkened, became unusual, and the whole body was covered with numerous stretch marks. Lying in bed, she could not break away from the thoughts of seductively hot, delicious pork legs. If you dip them into a fragrant sauce, add a little garlic paste, and eat everything together, pleasure would be incredible. However, she has already recovered. But Jeremiah will have to go to work tomorrow, but how hard you want to taste pigs? The girl could not stand the tension and wept. However, Jeremy did not worry at all for himself or her weight. Waking up from her tears, he immediately jumped and went to the store behind his legs. Returning and with all tenderness watching the girl who enjoying the food, Jerem said, "She really gained a little weight, but it only added her special charm and beauty. In the end, it was thanks to her tenderness and boundless care that he chose her with his wife. If she is so worried about it, why not go together for a pleasant walk? It does not matter that she took a little shape. For her beloved husband, she remains incomparable. Her attempts to prove that she feels even more love for him were in vain, because he was constantly ready to give her even more than she could imagine." During the operation, Jeremy felt much more intense emotions again than Charlie. She could not allow her to give birth on her own because this procedure was much more risky, especially given that they had twins. They turned to leading doctors. They are sure that everything would certainly be good. Expecting his wife in the hallway, Jeremy radiated such a wave of anxiety that one of the employees, fearing for his health, gave him a heart pill so that his boss, God forbid, did not cause a stroke. The chairman of the council was covered by the same horror. The Judamord was plunged into prayer, but only Grace remained calm. The father-in-law was so nervous that he persistently demanded not only to give him a pill, but also to immediately give it a sedative. Finally, the door dissolved and a nurse appeared on the doorstep that called her father. Two guys were in excellent health and were born with a barely noticeable difference in time. Charlie was wonderful. They are now real parents. Jerome felt such an incredible joy that he barely kept tears while just in the ward. Others were allowed into the tent, but they tirelessly recorded all the events on the camera, removing through the glass. In the first photo of the baby, wept near the chairman of the council, while Utah radiated joy. She finally became aunt. For a while, the girl, full of joy, hurried to the house of newly made parents to see the kids for the first time who had gained a little. However, an unexpected discovery was already waiting for her on the intercom. Calling at the door was strictly forbidden so as not to wake up those who were quietly resting. The door opened Jerimo, and his appearance immediately made it clear that he should not be awakened. The house was crowded with bottles and nipples, and numerous pranes and cubes gave the impression of real chaos. The charm enjoyed the massage, and the father was crowded with things that had to be done before returning. At the moment when Jeremiah was washing quickly, crying came. At first, one baby woke up, and immediately his cries were awakened by another. The relentless cruelty of paternity forced him to constantly switch from one case to another, but at that moment, it did not bother UTU. She could afford to please the baby with funny grimaces without burdened with many responsibilities. It turned out that the child gladly perceived her cheerful pranks. The baby began to, and I could hardly cause such delight in Utubal. However, the exhausted Jeremy, at least outside, did not show such enthusiasm. He put a second baby to sleep and said, "If you like it, let you take care of the children while I'm a little subtrade. Although the day is still going on, if it is a little subtraced, it will be able to help Charlie with children at night." He fell to the floor and instantly fainted again, plunging into difficult reflections on his parental destiny. She soon returned after the Charlie massage session, looking incredibly fresh and relaxed. Despite the absence of the mother, Utah did perfectly with two children, and everyone was equally fun. The girl approached her husband. Gently stopping her gaze on it, she thought of what he was sweet and how tirelessly tried. He immediately woke up, and it seems that they immediately entered a casual competition to decide which one of them is more delicate and who loves whom more. Both Utah and Gemini were clearly dissatisfied with the door. Soon, Janin came to the children, worrying that with light snacks, her appearance could be too early. However, Jutva strongly assured that her mother appeared in time. Otherwise, she, along with the young couple, would not be able to withstand the splash of the skills that the spouses were brilliantly shared. After pouring the men, they sat down at a government table. Nothing could be more pleased with girls than aromatic, delicious meat. At work, everyone understood how difficult it is to do without a charm and what significant role she played. The girl was genuinely joyful, hearing that her contribution was evaluated for the weight of gold. She even got rid of, learning what she was eagerly awaited at work, and also how much a couple perceives it. Although it would be better for her to hold her tongue, but when the conversation came to a certain person, she instantly turned into a sugary sugar syrup. Her shining face said for herself, "Try to ask why my soul sings joy. Just ask." I didn't decide to meet him. But who is this mysterious new moon? Of course, this cute young man who skillfully cooks coffee and creates dessert masterpieces is Hugh. Utah called him a baby, which caused confusion in everyone around, so she was definitely not eligible for too pleasant news from Charlie and Jeremy. What about Jane in personal relationships? She has caused this dialogue with great embarrassment. She refused to recognize mutual feelings to Derek, insisting that he was just a work colleague. However, she accidentally remembered that he had recently spent her. Of course, the girls could not pass this fact and immediately began to demand all the details. This broke the girlfriend so much that the Yanin literally felt as their uncontrollable curiosity joined her to the chair. From the constant glamour, even Jeremy, completely beaten by fatigue, woke up. It was another late evening in Korea, and Janine worked tirelessly. Utah left that day to help her. However, she did not seek to take over work because additional payment for her would seem superfluous. Derek, who was originally going to leave, eventually decided to stay, despite the fact that his motives were absolutely clear. 3 of them did not cope quickly, and one girl would undoubtedly remain in the case until late at night. To think that the cause of the dispute this evening will be a way of returning home. Who, whom, and where it will go. So they decided to go 3 on the car of Derek, but first stay at the cafe for a small meeting. Utah, together with the manager, plunged into alcohol, after which they decided to order more drinks, although there was only a split through the window. Yanen tried unsuccessfully to convince them, and she had to accept the behavior of drunken youth. However, the fun were so incredible that it eventually obeyed the atmosphere and also asked to pour. In the end, they completely emptied several bottles and plates. It was most intoxicated by Janin, who seems to have not possessed the art of drinking. Їй було неймовірно смачно, весело, але одночасно з цим сумно. Derek watched her behavior in surprise and thought that she may be right. If she was not able to stop in time, it is really better to drink rarely. She, inspired by noble gusts, in fact, almost fed him. In general, finally, I had to call the mother of Janin to find out her address and deliver the girl home. She immediately grabbed the phone, immediately refuting all the attempts to convince her parents that she had drank not so much. Immediately after fun, she quickly plunged into deep sadness, as it inevitably happens. Адже їй неодноразово радили не виходити заміж за того чоловіка. I did not start crying, and Derek tried to rejoice me, gently snorting on my back. Puda finally understood the situation, felt the change in the atmosphere, and, justifying the meeting with the boy, hastily departed. And now Derek is already going to take his boss. She has already sent him an address. Наступного ранку прокидання стало справжнім випробуванням для Янин. The bright sunlight, along with the throbbing headache, made her regret that she opened her eyes. However, nothing could prevent her from having to be given to the girlfriend who was always late for kindergarten. Only she stepped on the threshold of the room as she immediately got a sharp reprimand from her mother. How can you drink? Where is your shame? Depressed, she went to drink the broth and prepare for work, gratefully accepting a mug donated by Derek. At first, she swallowed the drink and only then realized who gave her this mug. What does he do here? Obviously, he was waiting in her home, and she does not remember anything at all. The mother appeared again, as if despite any shame because of her full amnesia. Its forgotten past has so much impeded the burden on a wonderful colleague. Yesterday, she invited him to spend the night, but later it turned out that she had burst. Fortunately, her failure did not affect his clothes. What a shame. Maybe she got it deserved from her mother. The girl was ready to go to kindergarten. It seemed that the idea of how Derek would spend her there filled her with sincere admiration. The memories were slowly returning. Yesterday, they went the street. She, confidently leading the way in front, and he carefully followed from the back, worrying that the girl did not slip. However, she not only fell, but also almost released him from her hands, covered with all-consuming joy. In the end, he did not turn on his back so that Janin would not hurt himself or him. What a look, this look. She completely went crazy. Only by gathering, Sadiq Janin dared to apologize, but it seemed that yesterday night had left him quite satisfied. Get in the car. Previous conversations have already affected the topics of hikes in the mountains. However, he was more fascinated not by the idea of traveling to the mountains, but by Miss Yanin, which he frankly stated. After all, he is promising and talented, sincerely seeks to be with her. But why doesn't she even give him any chance? Although he has sympathy for her, she strongly states that she does not plan to link her life with him. She already has a daughter, and the previous marriage ended in divorce. Therefore, it is better for him to find a young companion for a common future. However, his parents will undoubtedly not approve of such relationships, especially given the lack of grandchildren. On the same day, he took a day off, and the next day suddenly visited her in his left, assuring that it was time to leave. However, they mistakenly went to the floor, and we had to climb the stairs. He obviously did it consciously. Because everyone was in the elevator, there was a great opportunity to communicate alone. Direg stretched out a receipt, which indicated the consent of his parents. Regardless of whether he decides to remain unmarried or whether he will be obeyed, his father will not demand anything from him. Because he had 3 older brothers, each of whom already had children, his parents did not insist at the next wedding. Now he can openly invite her to meet. I could not finally decide. Although a fervent desire for love was burning in me, the fear of starting a relationship has hampered every opinion. It was the deepest that he felt my doubts even better than I myself could realize them. He was ready to meet without a wedding for 10 centuries just to be with her. It was the 3rd time he frankly recognized his feelings in front of her. He got out of his pocket sweets donated by Janin's daughter. If she immediately tastes them, it will be perceived as an agreement to a meeting. Otherwise, nothing will change. It will simply disappear from her thoughts. But she didn't want it. The girl silently agreed to taste the malicious candy because she did not seek his disappearance. The gift of her daughter connected her mother with her husband, who soon turned out to be not just a colleague, but a true friend and partner. The next day they met to dine together. Utah noted that the girl's face remained as if the motto was smeared. The girl started justifying herself, explaining that she brushed her teeth. Yes, even before lunch. And what? Samut was very concerned. She would soon have to go on a business trip to Indonesia, and Hugh will stay here. What can she do? It is not possible to simply cover it with glue. The next day, she met him in a cozy cafe, constantly praising a novelty among desserts. He even wondered whether it would be necessary to include the novelty in the menu, because he dreamed of cooking such exquisite delicacies. Hugh had already felt boredom in advance, though the girl was still sitting right in front of him. But in that case, why does he not marry her? Did he plan to marry her already when he goes on a long journey? She did not want to leave him alone. Determined, the girl stretched out a box with rings, making a proposal. However, Hugh immediately disagreed. His answer was filled with doubts. At once, Utah was hidden by a ring covered with shame and dissatisfaction with his reaction. However, she instantly moved to the exit, insisting that in no way she had left behind, because it could have caused her excessive excitement. Talking to her girlfriends, Utah immediately realized if he just sitting in a cafe suddenly made her an offer, she would immediately feel a real dissatisfaction. It seems that she had to take care of the creation of a much more romantic environment. Nothing, you can fix everything. Just try again. Then he will stop being so confused and everything will definitely work out. Charlie suggested making an offer at the hotel, but since they have never been there together, both found a great restraint. Then you should only choose the time-tested tools, because the weekend, just predict the rain. And so they came to the Persian, set to go into an unforgettable romantic walk. Utah, without a doubt, knew that he liked these cozy corners, and she in turn knew everything about him to the smallest details. They have already flowed to a small island where Utah carefully agreed all the details of Charlie. Everything was perfectly prepared, and the hostess of the house was warned in advance. The promised rain began unexpectedly. As for Evil, none of them had time to find an umbrella, and they had to look for shelter in a small house. Yu arranged a bed for YouTube so that it would not freeze due to lack of ideal. It was warm and cozy. Sono's piece was already starting to wrap it, but she struggled strongly so as not to be sleeping. Undoubtedly, the girl failed, and soon she jumped sharply, feeling that time had already fallen. No, the hostess of the hut promised to know when the boat was going, so Utah could enjoy a peaceful dream. The lady immediately appeared in the door. It turned out that because of heavy rain, the boat will not leave today, so it will have to stay here for the night. The couple enjoyed the rainy evening sitting together on the porch. It was incredible. Probably, this moment was perfect for the proposal. But even before she had to say the word, Hugh kissed her immediately. Only a few seconds, he asked her to close her eyes and lean to look into his pocket, as if getting ready for an unexpected step. It is unclear why none of them had time to take any measures, because suddenly a helicopter was raised over them from which Jeremy's voice erupted. He arrived at his sister, that damn rescuer. In addition, he did not arrive himself. His grandfather joined him. Where did they find out where she is? Or maybe they tracked her phone. It was hastily disappeared until the alert relatives broke a special atmosphere. In addition, the real shelter for them was an umbrella, which made it possible to hide quickly. It turned out that the probe belonged to Uhui. Both they managed to hide from the rain in a small house. In fact, all the events became a real romantic color, even when they almost unfolded a fiery pursuit. Utah penetrated the barn, trying to hide, while Huss, using her phone, headed to the opposite end of the island, seeking to knock down Jeremy, who was her neighbor. He is not waiting for any danger, and it is better for girls to stay here. Waiting for meeting a young man, Utah looked at the shiny rings in a brand new box. Cursed Jeremy. She so tirelessly helped him to attach a relationship with Charlie, and now he is the main obstacle to her own wedding. The door opened, and a mysterious man in the hood entered the shed. Suddenly, everyone enveloped the piercing cold and anxiety. However, it turned out that it was just Charlie, who brought the raincoat and ordered to move behind her. Where did she come from here? And who, in general, should she worry? Apparently, in the second house, they were already waiting for Jeremy. He ordered her to enter and not delay in all circumstances, not to leave with him a grandfather who spent the night outside the house. Inside, many candles surrounded by shimmering, living light were waiting for them. He planned everything carefully to prepare a real surprise for her. There was a box in his hands that made it possible that he intended to make her an offer. However, the box appeared in the box. Utah seems to be not aware of what was happening. He explained that the clock was set out of Indonesian time to always remind of his wife's actions, wearing him constantly on his hand. Standing on his knees, he extended her a small box with his clock. He was aware that it was not worth such a powerful, kind, and sincere woman, but a fervent desire to be with her covered his heart. Suddenly, the uterus asked, "What does it mean? Does she really no longer wish to become my wife?" No, in fact, she really wants this and even planned to make him a proposal. FJ carefully attached a clock to the girl's hand. How can you not fall in love with her? How not to want to make her with his wife? When they came out, they met, Charlie with the priests. It turned out that even in this perfect plan was one unexpected detail that was already waiting for its moment around the corner. It was the head of the padded who was insanely worried. He was horribly angry. Does he really intend to spend the night with his granddaughter before the wedding? It is clear that there is nothing missed here. So Yopotop showed him a ring. After all, they are already engaged and their connection is not in doubt. This event was even more stirring up the head of the predator. Where, in fact, is Nice? For what purpose? Jeremy led the main thing to reassure him. Charlie was forced to admit that she was aware of the plan of Hugh before Utah decided to make him a proposal. The piece was installed during a tea seal at the table. The series had to agree that Jutopa would leave his native cell. It was the most joyous boat swimming for her little life. Jeremy was genuinely rejoiced in them, and the head was simply unable to restrain their emotions. All his grandchildren are already so adults. Finally, they discovered true happiness. On the laptop, Charlie slowly and thoughtfully embodied her plan, step by step closer to reality. She purchased 50 bitcoins. After all, understanding of future trends is an invaluable advantage in the investment world. After all, there is nothing more valuable than money. She could relax, but decided to work, because it will provide for herself more opportunities in the future. Jeremy entered the room. Instead of telling what he plans to spend money on, she just offered him a piece of cake. The girl carefully wiped a small stain of the cream left after the piece she tasted herself. And at that moment, she radiated a unique charm, reminding her first meeting. Time seemed to stop, and he kissed her, without losing his moments. But who allowed her to be so stunning? The man acted too quickly, and she tried to slow it down. Why not go to bed? Interrupting the events, the Jarled phone rang. It was not a casual call. One of those employees who rarely called just like that. However, he did not want to answer the call, so he decided to postpone the phone to simply not pay attention to the signal. Parley was much decisive than he could imagine. It was she who took the call and took Kamuja's phone. He thought quite about another, but now he was forced to talk about Anna Hikla, because she enjoyed her solving trick, and it would be all right if she was only easy to giggling. Charlie returned to the fact that they were distracted and gently led her lips around Jerry's neck. With great efforts, he barely finished his speech and, as soon as possible, immediately threw the tube. And where could she get that skill? Charlie stated that knowledge was taken from books. Well, if so, he will do as described in the literature. Jeremy waved, carefully arranging everything he needed so that the girl could conveniently ride his surface. Does he really mean this place? And what if children suddenly appear? No, they will not be. The man has already put them to sleep. Now is the best moment to start until someone decided to call him. Charlie was discontinuing as if she had felt for the first time. What a wonderful man. Fortunately, he purchased a spacious and comfortable table. As for the inconvenience, now the perfect moment to stretch these clothes a little. If it is set to it, they will have to move to the bed. Charlie did not want to stay in the office because there was absolute discomfort. After a while, she confessed that she never imagined that marriage could give such happiness. Memories of previous marriage still lived in her memory, and she did not assume that someone voluntarily chooses a similar path. Jeremy was ready to make her even happier. It is enough for her to simply express her wishes. However, frankly, only he was needed.